Yo guys, I've got a spark which I'm going to use to ignite the fire for a brand new video, one of which that has been in the works for a very long time since I created this PowerPoint presentation from scratch, and it took me an awfully long time to do so. Regardless, we are going to be ranking every Skylander from worst to first, as the introduction towards this PowerPoint presentation would allude to right here. Now what I mean by all Skylanders is every unique character, so to say. So that includes for cores, for giants, for swappers, the trapmasters. Then there's also for senseis from imaginators, whether they're for brand new ones or for villains that have been rehabilitated, mind you. But when it comes to superchargers, it's quite interesting since we got a lot of reposes in that game, 8 in fact from the 8 original elements. But when it comes to those, reposes, they count as their own unique slots in comparison to the originals because they have a complete redesign and a completely unique gameplay style to those original cores that they are based off of, mind you. So therefore, with them being so different and so changed up from the originals, it makes them unique and worthy of getting their own slots on the list. So that means that Super Shot Stealth Elf will be given her own unique spot to the regular Stealth Elf. For example, without further ado, starting off this list, we have the worst Skylander in existence, Blastermind. This character's design is quite lame. His figurine is one of the worst, with it being so stick-like. It's a very boring generic pose. It's got no unique texture into it. It makes it so that the physicality of this character is very, very boring and has nothing interesting behind it. And his gameplay, whilst being unique in concept, is awful in execution because it's weak. It relies on small enemies being around that you can take over the mind of, but they aren't powerful once you do so. And whenever there isn't anything around for you to mind control with, it makes this whole moveset not work and just come across as so lame and awful. So this character's gameplay is bad, his design is bad, his figurine is bad, and ultimately even his personality is pretty bland as well. So there's nothing about this character I actually like, and hence why he's 167. But moving on to 166, it's Wrecking Ball. I hate this character's design. It's a glorified bowling ball. You know, it's a ball with small little things added to it, such as the yellow spikes and the red things on top of his head. I don't even know what they're supposed to signify in the grand scheme of the design. So overall, this character has a really lame design, but that's not where the weaknesses of this character end, because his gameplay itself is awfully lame, and it grosses me out. It gives me a bad taste and makes me not want to play the character further because he burps, and to me that's disgusting. I don't want to play as a Skylander that makes that noise, because burping just sounds so disgusting. So that distaste I have and me not wanting to play with this character further is ultimately what makes him so lame. But on the bright side, he is at least not Blastermind, and that's the main positive behind this character, that he isn't Blastermind. In fact, going on from here, every single Skylander has that strength to them, even the characters like Sprocket, you know, if they're not Blastermind. And Sprocket has an awesome design. I love the contrast and colours of the blues and the yellows and everything. The wrench is an awesome weapon, and it's her design that ultimately elevates her on this list, mind you. But what I don't like about her is the gameplay. Sure, the tank is really cool, but apart from that, all of her other attacks are very, very weak. Her wrench is far too up close and personal, making it very ineffective in combat since it deals very little damage and makes it far too easy for enemies to attack and damage Sprocket. And that just means that, you know, she's died more often than not, so you don't really get the chances to play with her because of how weak her moveset is. But moving on, we have Drill Sergeant 164. He's got a really unique gameplay style to him, since you can fire off rockets and charge whilst you're utilising the blaster all simultaneously. However, the blaster circles around you, so it's not targeting a single enemy, so that means that you're only ever hitting enemies like 2% of the time. The blaster is so weak that it's not even worth attempting to conduct said simultaneous activities. And then the rest of his gameplay is very generic. You know, other Skylanders have charging and rockets, and other Skylanders do it much better. And not to mention, this guy's design, whilst being pretty cool, you know, having draw for arms, it's not for greater Skylanders has to offer. It's definitely amongst the weaker side once you compare it to other Skylanders designs and how unique if they are. So this character doesn't really stand out, and because of that, it gets 164 on the list. But 163, we have Terrafin. I hate the fact that when you bury it into the ground, that animation can so easily be disrupted by enemies attacking you. It means that it's very difficult to belly flop enemies and incorporate strategy into this character because how easy those animations are interrupted and how slow they are. His punches are also slow and such a generic attack for the Skylander to take, since many of the Skylanders have that attack, mind you, and pull it off in much more unique ways than what Terrafin does. His design, well, he's a shark and that's about it. So ultimately, this character doesn't stand out from the crowd. His gameplay is far too slow paced and makes this character boring and makes me not really want to play with him. So that puts him at 163, even though I know a lot of you would disagree with that. But regardless, moving on to another controversial opinion. I don't like Warnado all that much. I understand that a lot of you like him for his design, and personally I think a turtle on top of a tornado is a pretty perfect design. I can't fault Warnado for that, but what I can fault him for is for really lame gameplay. You know, he conjures up tornadoes, he spins forward, it's very awfully paced, it's got really bad movement to it. His tertiary attack is basically a waste since he rides a tornado for it. So ultimately, it's the gameplay really letting the Skylander down. It's got some terrible movement options, it's not that fun, it's pretty weak. And that's what gets him number 162 right here. But 161 is going to be Crusher. His attacks are slow, but they are powerful, which is his main upside, which is why he's this far into the list, mind you. And his design is also pretty cool, you know, having for helmet, for hammer, for belt. It just makes him a little bit less generic in execution than what other rock monsters are, or rock golems from Skylanders, so to say, because there's just more going on with that design and it's got more detail incorporated into it. But with his gameplay being so slow and most of his attacks being absolutely useless besides his hammer attack, which is powerful, but the other attacks not really helping to complement that or combo into it, is ultimately what makes this guy easily the worst giant. But moving on, we have Thumpack. Yet another giant, which his main problem is his speed. He's incredibly slow and awfully paced. His attacks are quite lame with some very terrible animations that look unfinished and are just so damn slow and not fun to utilize in the slightest. His design is pretty awesome, you know, having a little ship wheel as a belt and then having a giant anchor. That's really cool, but unfortunately his posing doesn't take much advantage of that since it's very generic. It's the exact pose you'd expect from a design like this, despite the fact that a design like this could have been posed in several different unique ways to make the design look even cooler, but that just wasn't meant to be. Now at 159 we have Gorilla Driller. Personally, I really love this character's design. The blend of, you know, him being a monkey and him having drills for parts is really cool and very robotic-esque. It's kind of like a blend of life and tech elements, which is something really cool to see, especially after Swap Force, where you could combine elements due to the swapping abilities. Speaking of which, you know, the bottom half of the characters, we're sticking to not being allowed to swap them out because, you know, being able to swap out Skylanders and mix and match them is an easy way to negotiate their flaws, mind you. So that's why, you know, combining different parts of different swappers isn't really counted towards this list. It'll kind of be cheating, especially when other Skylanders don't have that ability. So looking at the bottom half of Gorilla Driller specifically, for banana turrets, whilst cool on concept, are really weak, and, you know, there is one path where you don't even get the banana turrets. You have to stick to nut turrets, I believe it is, which are very weak and quite lame, to be honest. You literally just press a button and then they do all of the auto-targeting for you. You know, it's not like Sprocket where you can jump into a turret and get a tank out of it all. And then his punches are far too close and deal too little damage, making the character very ineffective in combat because he can't defeat enemies fast enough and they can very easily damage him. For monkeys, whilst having some really awesome sound effects, once again, our attack I never ever utilise because they're so weak. So above all, if his gameplay had more to it, it was less generic in its execution, was just more powerful to encourage me to play this Skylander more, I could easily see myself enjoying this design enjoying this character even a whole lot more. But as it stands, his personality is bland, so all what's left of him really is for awesome design. Now at 58 we have yet another awesome design. It's a phoenix mixed with a dragon in the form of Sunburn. His colours are really contrasting and look really cool and blend in with the fire element very well to make him a fresh part of a Sparrows Adventure slate, mind you, but when it comes down to it, I don't like his gameplay much, which might be a bit of a controversial statement, but his flame breath is generic, his movement options are terrible. You'd think with teleportation and a Phoenix Dash that he'd have some really awesome unique movement to go around, but unfortunately that's just not the case, since the animations really ruin these movement options for me, with the animations being so slow and creating such a slow-paced character, so that's ultimately where the main downsides of Sunburn lie. That 157, we have Eruptor, yet another lame design. It's just an orb with some rock arms and rock legs. There's nothing really all of that cool to it, and I have no idea why this character returned so much. It made me so sick of a character seeing so many lame poses of him, because there's only so many ways you can pose a rock orb that has rocks for arms and legs. You know, he might not have hands, and that is unique and definitely quite fresh in the grand scheme of things, but even then it's not enough to make this design stand out, and the gameplay on top of that isn't all that great either. The eruption, whilst you upgrade it down the eruption path, is so broken and so awesome, and it winds up being a move that you spam, and the repetitive gameplay is quite dull because you don't want to use his other attacks when his eruption is so overpowered. So you have a waste of alternate attacks, and the eruption itself, you know, is the best no matter what path you take, which means that if you take the path that isn't eruption based, it's so worthless and doesn't improve the Skarner in much manner whatsoever. But moving on, we have 157 Nightmare, a character which I myself consider quite overrated, since sure, she has some really cool animations, and her design being a centaur is really cool, but that leaves her with a huge hitbox, some very terrible movement options. So she dies far too easily, and because of that, you don't really play as her for very long when you place her on the portal now, do you? Especially on the high difficulties. So when you're having fun with this character, that fun is often short-lived. The moves are very generic, you know, sword combos, charging attacks, and for Shadow Horn for me never ever seems to work right. It always seems to glitch out on me, so that means that her tertiary attack is a complete waste, and it just really draws back the fun that this character could potentially have with such a unique design, mind you. 155 is going to be Tough Luck. If you guys really love Tough Luck and wish she was lower down on the list, all I can say to that is Tough Luck. This is my list, not yours. And that's my favourite thing about Tough Luck, the fact that her name is so easy to incorporate into puns. But what I don't like about her, however, is the fact that such an awesome design gets some lame gameplay options. You know, you can create leaf piles for you to sneak inside of, and then create pouts and attacks, which is so generic. It's so similar to Stealth Elf, and so because of her gameplay being so similar to other characters, and, you know, similar doesn't equal better, you know, in this case is more weaker, then that just takes a lot of the fun out of the character for me, because I just feel like there's other Skylanders I can play with that are much better and do the exact same thing as what Tough Luck can do. But moving on to 154, we have Rubble Rouser. I hate slow characters, and that's exactly what Rubble Rouser is. He has terrible movement options. He's awfully paced. Sure, he's powerful, but that's about it. And even then, it's not satisfying to use that power in the slightest, because his gameplay is so generic and derivative of other Skylanders. You know, he buries into the ground and chucks up rocks. Oh, wait, he can swing his hammer. That's about it. There's no surprises with the Skylander. You know, you look at the design and think... I think his gameplay is going to be one way, and it turns out that's exactly what his gameplay is like. So lack of predictability and just how slow paced the character is ultimately what gets 154. And we have yet another Rock Golem. What a lazy design for a Swap Force character. We've already seen several Rock Golems in Skylanders, so why do we need another one? Regardless, coming in at 153, we have Diveclops, a character which has a really lazy design. He's an eyeball with a chunk of armor surrounding him. It feels like a design ripped straight out of Scooby-Doo, so the genericness isn't fun there. It's lazy. His gameplay is kind of cool, combining the missiles with the sonar array, but unfortunately it's quite weak. But, you know, sometimes weak gameplay sets are fun to utilize, and that's exactly what Diveclops is. He's fun in game. But, you know, that's only one element of the Skylander, and the rest of his elements really suck. His posing isn't all that great and doesn't execute the design in any original, unique ways. Just adds to the further genericness and laziness put into the design, and that's ultimately why I have a distaste for this character. At 152, we have Smash Hit. He has some really unique gameplay that's really fresh and really fun to utilize. I love a combination of being able to detach his Wrecking Ball and then reattach it with an awesome animation and an awesome attack for his Soul Gem ability. That Soul Gem ability almost saved the Skylander for me, but unfortunately he's very, very slow. And, you know, Superchargers is a very fast-paced game, so playing with a slow character just feels really inappropriate and really drags the whole game down for me, because, you know, there's so many more Skylanders that you have more fun with because they're so fast-paced and can really move through the levels so much more better than what this character can. So the lack of movement options is a really big downside to this character, and I don't like his texturing and his posing for the physical figurine. It's not all that fun to engage with. His variant colours are terrible, but they aren't really taken into account for this list, but it's still something worth noting. He introduced the steel-plated variants, and they are really ugly variants. But yeah, you know, Smash Hit might have a great design and might have a really great gameplay concept, but ultimately it's his lack of speed that really lets this character down, and because it slows down the pacing of the entire game, it really means that, you know, he makes the game as a whole feel less fun, and that's one thing that I don't appreciate out of Skylanders, to say the least. But at 151, we have Dr. Neo Cortex. Unfortunately, a very weak sensei. His attacks are very generic. They are exactly what you'd expect, even though it is really cool to see the intertextuality between the Crash Bandicoot franchise and the Skylanders franchise. So that's really the best thing to come out of Dr. Neo Cortex. The rest of him, he doesn't really display much personality since he doesn't have any dialogue lines. His figurine is very flawed since his head is so big. It makes the figurine very top heavy and makes him topple over, so he's not a great display piece. And overall, I just wish he was more powerful of a sensei. For senseis and imaginators is meant to be more powerful than this, so I have no idea why Dr. Neo Cortex is as weak as he is. But coming in at 150, we have Hurricane Jetvac, which is like regular Jetvac, but much worse. Sure, he has really good pacing with his somersault, dive kick thingamacbob that's well animated, but launching blades and having his vacuum blaster just isn't as great as the original Jetvac, because, you know, there's no satisfaction in sucking in your enemies anymore. You know, you don't get that powerful burst of air by doing so. There's no strategy here. And ultimately, his design is also really weak amongst all of the other supercharger reposes that did so much to really improve and expand upon the original design. And this one is just practically the same as the original Jetvac, with some armor and a new weapon to go around. It doesn't do all that much to expand upon it and make it just feel so fresh and unique in comparison to that original Jetvac counterpart, making him so boring and so needlessly shoehorned into the game just because Activision really needed another Jetvac for some reason. Regardless, at 149 we have a regular Jetvac, which I've definitely put him up much lower than most other people would. But that's because I don't think Jetvac is as bad as people say he is. You know, he's an eagle with a vacuum gun. It's a really cool design. And his gameplay has an element of strategy to it as you suck in enemies, gain a more powerful shot, and then launch it back at enemies. But naturally that means that the path where you don't get that ability is really, really bad. Jetvac literally sucks down that path. And, you know, his gameplay, whilst that definitely does have a unique take on it, you know, for strategy element, it's just not fun. Unfortunately, you know, it's well thought out, but not fun, and that really makes this Skylander drag in terms of the pacing and makes him kind of lame, so to say, which is why he's 149 to say the least. But at 148 we have Slobbertooth. He's once again a very, very slow character, which makes his pacing awful, might I tell you, awful. And then, you know, he has a tail, which if you don't even utilize the right path, you don't even get a tail swipe out of it, which is just disappointing going into a design where you expect more of a tail to be incorporated. So the fact that they have a key part of the design that's kind of wasted in the gameplay is something very annoying. And he's a pretty gross Skylander too. You know, you hear chomping sound effects, and, you know, you spit enemies out at other enemies. It's just very distasteful and makes me not really want to play with this character because of the grossness behind that moveset. But moving on, we have at 147 Whamshell. I love the design here. A crab with a mace as a weapon. Something really, really cool, and I love the irony that he, you know, is a sea creature that utilizes other sea creatures to defeat his enemies with. That's a nice twist, mind you. But his gameplay isn't all that much to write home about. Sure, he has that Poseidon Strike, which is very powerful, but if you don't use the Poseidon Strike path, you don't get as powerful as an attack, which is far too melee-based, making this character far too easy to be hit by enemies. And his other attacks are far too weak, not to mention even down the Starfish path. The Starfish aren't all that powerful, and his mace isn't that fun to utilize either. It's not all that well animated. Sure, it's a more unique weapon in Skylanders, which is something cool to see from a design standpoint, but from a gameplay standpoint, they literally do very little with it besides some fun animations to watch. So this character is very poorly paced, and that's what puts him at 147. 146, we have Hothead. I like how you can combine his oil with his fire. It's got some really nice strategy behind it, but ultimately this character is slow and has really terrible movement options, making him very awfully paced and a very lame character to play as because of it. But at 145, we have Headrush, who has some of the best movement in the game. She's a very fast-paced character, but unfortunately, outside of her charge and attack and the fun movement capabilities it presents you with, there's not much to this character to really invest yourself in. Her yodeling is annoying to listen to, and her stomping attacks just leave her so open and are so poorly animated that you don't really want to use them, you don't want to watch them, and so Headrush is just a boring character really, which is something very unfortunate. But hey, sometimes a boring character is better than a bad character because she's still not Blastermind. Regardless, moving on to 144, we have Whirlwind. I love the fact that you can utilize Whirlwind to heal up another player in a co-op. It's a really unique mechanic. It makes the Skylander feel extremely fresh. And I love the fact that it's a blend between a unicorn and a dragon with a design. That's something really cool as well. But unfortunately, her tertiary attack is wasted on a flight ability, which is completely worthless since, you know, from Swap Force onward, you can fly just by double jumping. So wasting an entire attack slot on flying is an absolute waste for me and makes this Skylander feel more generic and less investing because of it to play as, mind you. At 144, 143 even, we got Hot Dog. A really cute design, mind you, which I really appreciate. His WoW power is awesome and takes full advantage of Hot Dog's cuteness to create a really awesome looking figurine that really expands upon the design in a really great way and conveys such great personality. But, you know, when it comes to Hot Dog, his design and his personality are about where the main positives end, because he shoots out fireballs, which is very generic for a fire Skylander. He might have a ground pound ability and, you know, a wall of fire, but once again, it's all stuff that we've seen from Skylanders before, making his gameplay feel generic, poorly paced, and just nothing to stand out amongst the cast of other awesome Skylanders, mind you. Now, at 142, we have Trailblazer. This guy's pretty well paced. He's got some awesome projectiles up his sleeve and some great animations, but apart from that, the gameplay can come off as quite generic and not nearly as fun as other Skylanders and what they can offer. So he's just one of the worst trap team cores, and doesn't really go underappreciated, unlike many of the other trap team cores, mind you, since Trailblazer is so bad in my personal opinion. And I don't like the fact that his design is basically there to appease the My Little Pony fans, because it feels like a design ripped straight out of that show, which makes it feel lazy and needless. But at 141, we have Slam Bam. I like the strategy where you freeze your opponents in ice and then move in, engage them with melee attacks. Makes this character quite fun on a gameplay standpoint, even if his tertiary attacks is an absolute waste with a bobsled that isn't all that faster anyway. It has a nice jingle for the series too, mind you, but, you know, a jingle and a bobsled and attack that deals damage. What an absolute waste of a WoW power, so to say. And for posing for this character also has a lot to be decided. He has 4 arms, come on. You can do much more with a pose than what he did with this guy's pose, with the 4 arms, mind you. And worse yet, because other Skylanders came out with 4 arms in later games, while Slam Bam was unique to start off with, you know, his design over time has just became quite lame in comparison to other characters with multiple arms functions, mind you, such as Thrillipede, mind you, that do the 4 arms faying, and the execution of that concept are much, much better, and I just had to say faying for the comedic effect. But moving on to 140, we have Cinder. I like the fact how her Shadow Dash and her lightning abilities can combine into one another. It's really unique and pretty cool. She's a well-paced character. And it's really cool, once again, the intertextuality, having a character from the mainline Spyro series incorporated into Skylanders. Unfortunately, her poses are pretty lame until you get into Swap Force, where Swap Force introduced us with a really awesome Cinder pose. It's about time. But the other Cinder poses don't really bring out much personality from the character, so ultimately she's just another dragon, and there's lots of dragons in Skylanders, so a dragon design needs to do more than this to stand out, even though the colours are quite contrasting, quite nice. But in-game she has a waste of attack once again, with her tertiary attack being a flight attack, which I absolutely hate. I would have preferred another attack to make it feel fresh in comparison to the other giants. And just overall, not having a waste of ability from Swap Force onwards. But at 139 even, we have Bookshot. It's such a shame that such an awesome design got such a lame moveset. He fires off arrows and can create magical teleportation areas to teleport your arrows from one part of the area to another to deal damage to several enemies. But unfortunately, the arrows are so weak, the portals are so weak, it makes the character not very fun as to play in-game, mind you. And because he's one of the weaker senseis, you just never wind up playing with him because there are so many better senseis to play as in the moment, mind you. So the gameplay does not do the design justice, and it's ultimately the design that elevates Buckshot as lower on the list as he is. But he's just such a disappointing character. I went into him so excited due to this design, and unfortunately the gameplay just didn't connect with me, and I don't have that much fun with it, and don't want to use it all that frequently when I would prefer utilising much more powerful senseis instead. But at 143, or 138 even, could have been more wrong with that numberization right there, we have Washbuckler. He's definitely got personality behind him, and it's really cool to see a pirate Skylander with both a sword and a gun. It creates some sort of unique gameplay, and he has some really great movement with those tentacle legs. But ultimately, he's not a well-paced character, despite some unique movement options and for constantly varying gameplay. And, his bubble gun is far too weak, so he's not effective from a distance. You have to get up close and personal, which his sword attack isn't nearly as powerful as it needs to be for an up close attack, therefore making Washbuckler far too easily killed by his enemies and not effective enough in combat for you to have much fun with him. And, whilst having both a sword and a gun is really cool, the attacks to come out of them is very generic. There are other Skylanders with swords or with guns that do this whole swashbuckling idea much better. They have a much better execution behind it, and they have far more powerful movesets, meaning that you want to play with them much more than this guy. So my unlongingness to play with Washbuckler is his main downfall, so to say. But moving on to 143, we have Stink Bomb. Why does he have some sort of stunning punch attack for his tertiary ability? Sure, it adds more to the personality for sure. But the shurikens aren't really all that powerful and feel so generic for a ninja-esque enemy. Like, seriously, they could have gave him so much more cooler weapons as a ninja. The design is really, really cool, a skunk and everything, but once again, his gameplay is based around something pretty gross, which is the smell of skunks, so that gives me a distaste whilst playing with this guy. And I just wish that he was much less generic, because his design is far from generic, mind you. So having such a generic gameplay style for such an unconventional design is very, very disappointing. And, that disappointment means that whenever I play with a Stink Bomb, I do not have a smile on my face. Regardless, at 136, we have Sonic Boom. I'm sorry for people who love Skylanders to, fight against crowds of enemies as a family. It's a really cute idea to have Sonic Boom fight against enemies as a family. But with that being said and done, this doesn't make Sonic Boom fun, far from it. You're constantly spamming for Scream Attack, which can get really annoying with and tedious with the repetitive sound effects constantly playing, mind you. So that makes her gameplay not very fresh nor focused, because, you have a screaming ability, which is completely different to the flight ability and for egg ability. It's like they couldn't stick with a single concept of this character. Makes her messy and just not all that fun to play with, unfortunately, making Sonic Boom yet again very disappointing, because her concept is most certainly there, but the execution of it is not. And moving on to 135, we have Kaboom, a Skylander which I know a lot of people like, but I myself have never been able to connect to, since with Kaboom, I don't like the design, I don't like the fact that, he's got such a big body build to him. It makes it so that then he stands out from a crowd in a bad way because he doesn't feel like a Skylander. He doesn't blend in with the other Skylanders. You know, such a body built up Skylander, mind you. So the unique design here in this case is a bad point because it's not nearly cartoony enough, and just something that I personally don't feel like I want to play as. I don't want to play with a Skylander that has their shirt off and is completely ripped and bodybuilded up. A cannon is also just such a generic way to go. You know, you've got a bodybuilder type character. What other weapon would you give him than a cannon? They should have gave him just a far more interesting weapon to go alongside for personality, mind you. Although he's amazing in Academy, but that's not what we're taking into mind here. Now at 134 we have Ninjini. This character is far more paced than other people led on, because if you utilise her combos, not only do they look cool in the animations, but they make her attacks far more quicker and more powerful. And it's really cool how she has the tail too, you know, the lack of legs makes her very unique in comparison to the other giants. And I do also like her bottle form, with the fact that her missiles are so fast and add so much freshness to her gameplay. You're constantly using different attacks, which means she never gets dull or boring. Though unfortunately there is a huge lack of movement speed, and her hitbox makes her very ineffective in combat because it's so easy for enemies to hit her. So there definitely is a lot of downsides to this character, but that I can most certainly agree with. Now 133, a little bit of a sneak peek of 132 right there, but regardless of 133, we have Doomstone, who is slow, not all that maneuverable. His bottom half is very underwhelming since it's so weak. You know, even with the projectiles, which are quite cool, they are also very weak, so you never want to ever utilize this bottom half, and yet it's integrated into the whole of Doomstone's design, so I have to take that into account for this list. And then, you know, we also have a shielding attack, which does barely any damage. It has no sort of bashing behind it, unlike what Chop Chop has. So I would have liked to have seen that, even if it would have been the exact same in execution as Chop Chop. In fact, even the column attack is the same as Chop Chop's. The only thing unique about it is the fact that it's got a really nice sounding effect behind it. So the sound effect ultimately saves this character for me, and so does the design as well, you know, for Greek-style armor behind it. And the fact that snakes come out of a shield in the gameplay is something really, really cool as well. But it does make the shield itself a good attack, despite the fact that it's so well animated, mind you, and so unique in that animation. But ultimately, I don't find myself enjoying this character very often, which is why he's at 133. But at 132, our very own sneak peek, it's Dunebug. I love this guy's design. It has some really nice contrast and colours and really stands out amongst the Skylanders crowd, while still at the same time feeling like a Skylander, so he doesn't have that same problem as Kaboom. I really like the fact that he can trap enemies, launch them off the side of an edge, or launch them into a wall and then utilise his orb attacks on them. But unfortunately, we have a waste of a tertiary attack here whenever he has his flight ability, which for SWAT Force is an absolute waste, since they could have gave him that flight animation just by double jumping. So, you know, the fact that this guy has a tertiary ability that makes him completely worthless, or does anything worthless in helping out on combat, I should say, and combat assistance, it just ultimately really drags his character down for me, and he's just not nearly powerful enough to be of a useful unit in game. So I just find myself not really enjoying this Skylander as much as I would want to, especially based on that awesome design of his. But at 131 we have a fan favourite for sure, Blackout. I hate how broken he is. You can't even utilise his more unique cool designs, such as the ones where he teleports enemies between his different teleportation rings, because defeating an enemy during this animation makes them invincible and makes it so that you can't advance throughout the game if you have, you know, an enemy gate or an enemy bounce pad coming up. So the fact that this character is so broken and not really fleshed out is an absolute waste to me. I love the gargoyle-esque aesthetic. It does make him really fresh and unique and stand out amongst the rest of the dragons, mind you. And I really do like his whirlpool-based attacks, you know, the ones where he creates the giant black holes, and, you know, the one where he flies up and has a huge area of damage below him whilst enemies can't hit him. Those are very powerful and very awesome attacks, but they are 1 out of 3, so, you know, batting for 3 and only hitting 1 makes this Skarner not as great as other ones in comparison, and that's why it's at 131, mind you. But at 130, we have Echo. Her attacks are very fluid and combo together very nicely, making her very fast-paced. Her animations are fantastic, and I love the fact that her shell ears kind of look like headphones to make her such a music-based Skarner. It's really what makes her personality so well expressed through this figurine, which is so gorgeous. It's very well detailed and really has that aquatic type feeling to it, although unfortunately it is very similar to Sap, so they definitely could have had a little more uniqueness in her design there. And her gameplay just isn't all that fun to me. Sure, it has some really great sound effects, but apart from that, the gameplay just isn't all that fun, you know, for bubbles, for slam and attack, for scream. They're fluid, they're powerful, they're just not fun. And I like fun Skarners, which is why I don't like this one. Anyway, at 129, we have Jawbreaker. Yet again, we have strategic Skarner here, even because you need to choose the best time for your Robot Rage mode, which makes the Skarner very fast-paced whilst utilising that. But then when you're not utilising it, you feel so slow in comparison and so awfully paced. But his Soul Gem absolutely saves him. You know, he would have been so much lower down on the list if it weren't for the fact that that Soul Gem is so cool and so well animated, with sparks flying out of it for instance you conjure it, mind you. But his design is kind of lame, to be honest. You know, he's a robot. There are so many robots and Skarners. You know, he has Traptanian Fists, which is definitely a unique weapon in comparison to the other Trapmasters, and it's the only part of the design I actually like, because the rest of it is very blocky, with no contrast and colours. So, you know, this guy does not stand out from a design standpoint, and makes him very, very lame, and I don't like how slow-paced his moveset can be whenever you're not in Robot Rage mode, mind you. Now at 128 we have Hex. I love the strategy behind this character, since you need to choose the best time to bring about your reign of schools. Otherwise, you know, it can be highly punishing towards you when your enemies can slowly but surely swarm you and easily get rid of you. Now, one thing I don't like about Hex is her figurine itself. It's got far too many weak parts to it. It's far too thin. It's not all that well textured, so it's not that fun to handle, and you know, when you're handling it, it's so easy to break. So her figurine design itself is very poorly thought out, despite the fact that I do like her design, for Witch-esque aesthetic is really cool. And again, I like the strategy to her gameplay, so there is that, but the figurine itself draws it down to 128, and the fact that it's just not as fun as other Skarners. You know, you might have a powerful moveset that's unique and fresh, but it's not fun, and that's ultimately what matters in gameplay. You know, it doesn't matter how great the concept is, if it isn't fun, then the Skarner's going to turn out lame. Just like with Blastermind, you know, he's the key example of that there ideal. But moving on to 127, we have Zook, another Skarner with a similar strategy to Hex, where, you know, he can create his wall of bamboo, which damages enemies, so that's very effective, mind you, and then he can utilize that for cover whilst he creates volley shots and shoots his bazooka through the wall of mushrooms or bamboo, mind you. This character can be very broken down one path, but absolutely useless down the other, so that terrible balancing is awful to see, because I love the bamboo path and how easy it is to trick enemies into running into the bamboo and then dealing damage from there. But ultimately, you know, a bazooka for a weapon, a defensive system, and a volley shot, it's just pretty generic, and his design is just so stereotypical of a life element, because, you know, we have several Skarners that are based off plants, so you'd think one based off a cactus type design, a potted cactus, could have been so cool, but unfortunately the execution of the design isn't all that great, or the execution of the concept of the design, should I say, you know, for potted cactus type, and his voice doesn't fit. Whilst his voice is definitely charismatic and very stereotypical, which is also a down point, I suppose. It just doesn't fit the character, you know, the Jamaican accent and everything. But moving on to 126, we have Skarner, which I have very rarely played as. I love the design here, but ultimately his moveset isn't all that fun to me. You know, he shoots out space lasers and, you know, throws out a space rock, which you can hit with a space laser to, you know, create a disco party, which is well animated for sure, and I've heard that this character becomes very, very powerful after you upgrade him. But here's the thing, because of how terrible he is right off the bat, with no upgrades whatsoever, and how weak he is out of the box, it just means that I don't really have much of a longing to go back to this character. I don't want to return to him. There's no reward in playing this guy, so that's why I just don't have a personal connection to this guy, unlike what a lot of you most certainly do. At 125, we have Shroom. I love the fact that you can launch him out of his self-slingshot. It adds a lot of personality to the character. He's got a really cool design too, because I love mushrooms, so having a mushroom Skylander is something really cool to see. Unfortunately, he's not got much strategy to him. Just mash for buttons and hope that, either your volley shot spores that fall down or your fungus mushrooms hit someone. It's just built on hope, so to say, which is not a good thing for a moveset to be built upon. And it's better than Zook's, but it's also the exact same as Zook's. So that lack of freshness within the gameplay and the fact that you can see it elsewhere just makes the Skylander feel more generic and less fun due to it. But coming in at 124, we have Pit Boss, yet another Skylander, which I don't play as very much because I don't really have much of a longing to. Going for a snake design once again feels so generic and lazy, since they've utilised the snake design so many times before this point, and they didn't need to do it again. So the fact that this design could have so easily been changed up and, given, and they could have given an undead sorcerer concept a much better design is ultimately what makes his character so disappointing. And in the game, his moveset doesn't really feel all that fluent, it's not all that well paced, but it is powerful at the very least, so there is some fun to be had in absolutely mowing down your enemies from afar, so that's ultimately what lands Pitbox at 124. And even with it being for lazy generic snake design, which Skyless has gone for many times, it's still a cool design, it's well textured, it's detailed, and it's fun to rub your hand along due to said good texturing, so there is at least that upside to Pit Boss. But moving on to 123 even, we have Riptide. I like the fact how you swap between weapons, between the Swordfish and the Hammerhead Shark. But unfortunately, this character doesn't really have much personality. And for gameplay, whilst you're constantly swapping between different weapons, it's very fast paced. It's just not that fun and kind of generic, having a weapon swap and then just smacking down enemies with that same weapon. Although the shark attack is really fun and the soul gem adds a lot to it, it's well animated, but it doesn't add anything to the personality, and it just makes the whole gameplay in general feel needless. And like a awesome design like this could have been coupled with some far superior gameplay techniques, so it's the execution of this gameplay that I don't like all that much. And he's also incredibly slow, so the pace of this character is awful. But at 122 we have Thunderbolt. I like his floating attacks and how well they chain together. His animations look pretty cool, but unfortunately his design just kind of feels like a blend of characters we've seen before, such as Ninjini with a sword, lightning rod. So his design doesn't really stand out and feels incredibly lazy, and feels like a secondary air Trackmaster could have been given so much more in terms of their design. And that's the main downfall for this Skylander, the fact that it isn't unique and it doesn't stand out on a design standpoint. But at 121 we have Chompy Mage, which is very weak out of the box, so once again I don't really have much of a longing to return to this character, since Senseis take a long time to upgrade, and I can't be asked to go through upgrades for a Skylander that I have no investment with to begin, due to how lame he is right out of the box. And I also hate the inconsistencies between his figurine and his in-game counterpart. I want a figurine to represent what a Skylander is like in-game, and this figurine fails on that front. In fact, this Skylander fails as a figurine altogether because its texturing isn't nearly as fun as you would have wanted. It isn't as personality driven, and having a staff that's replaced by a bazooka in game, and having a bazooka as his battle class was a mistake to begin with, because you have bazooka battle class imprinted onto his base, whilst having a staff that sorcerers are known to have. The mix of designs just don't really work, and it makes the figurine just so lame. And as I said before, the gameplay definitely gets really good after it's upgraded, but the fact that it has such a rocky start makes this Skylander just one that I don't really want to play with all that much, despite the great personality. Now, at 120, we have Grim Creeper. I hate how slow-paced this character is. He moves slowly. His animations are slow. He has a really lame Lightcore effect. Well, it can be hit or miss, so to say. Really does depend on the strength of the LED. But I do like what the Lightcore effect symbolizes. It adds a lot to the design, actually, so I take back my previous statement. But overall, this character just disappointed me. Such an awesome design, deserved such better gameplay, because, you know, most of his attacks are scythe-based. You know, you spin the scythe after a generic free-hit combo, and then the other one is him spinning his staff to knock back enemies with. And that's the only thing it's good for, really. Knocking back enemies is his animation cycle is far too long, so you get hit by ranged enemies far too easily because of it. And just doesn't deal enough damage, unfortunately. But I do like the fact that Grim Creeper can leave his body, tag multiple opponents, and then deal all of them as he returns. As his body even starts to catch up with a trail that his soul has left behind for him. That adds strategy and is really cool, but once again, the animations take far too long and it's far too easy to damage the body on the enemy's behalf in this time, making him very ineffective in combat. But at 119, we have Rhino. I relate to this character since I myself have had problems with anger in the past, so for relatability, invest me in this guy's character since he has a lot of personality to go around. And for voice actor, did a fantastic job really bringing a lot of energy and charisma to the character. Unfortunately, I don't like his gameplay. It's far too melee-based and not powerful enough to warrant the meleeness behind it, making him far too easily defeated by enemies, so you're not playing with him very long, which can spoil the fun far too quickly for you. At 118, we have T-Rex. I love the amount of power that he was able to capture with his character, for sheer scope of his power, so to say, because the whole ground quakes and winds up in slow motion and creates knockback from you charging up his fist as it slams it into the ground. That's really cool and very well animated. It adds a lot of detail to the character and personality. I don't like Repose, and I think it's quite generic, although it is nice how your hand fits underneath the arms and around the chest so nicely. So Reposing makes it fun to play with a character, even if Reposing itself is quite generic and doesn't do much to truly emphasize how awesome this design is, mind you. And the rest of his gameplay outside of a charge and the cannon is quite worthless. Not the charge, by the charge I meant his charging up his ground fist. You know, the actual charge itself isn't all that fun and doesn't work to help make this guy well paced, because he is so slow and so poorly paced, mind you. So the fact that the charge doesn't really help that out makes it kind of a worthless attack that I never wind up using. I only ever wind up using for charging pounding ability or the cannon, mind you, making one path clearly better than the other, so the unbalance there is really frustrating. Now at 117 we have Lightning Rod. I wish this character was more powerful, especially since he's supposed to reflect a god, so you know, they really didn't take full advantage of his concepted design with the gameplay now, did they? Although the gameplay is still fun. Raining down lightning on your enemies, especially from afar, is very, very satisfying, so to say. Now, in-game, you know, he's very unique in the fact that he has a cloud instead of legs, creating for some very unique animations. But the figurine didn't really have a unique way to execute this, besides just making his base more higher up and surrounding the rest of his body. You know, they would have been much better off saving this design until later on, where they could have, you know, had his cloud kind of suspended off the rest of the base and just better in execution than what it is. Because it just looks this way like a more thick base rather than a key point to the Skylander, that being his cloud bottom half. But at 116 we have Bouncer. I love how button mash he is, and the fact that he's so effective when doing so. I also love the strategy behind him, since, you know, whilst targeting enemies with his rocket shoulders, you leave yourself completely vulnerable, but can easily wipe them out, so the strategy there is something really cool to see. I like the fact that he has a wheel. It adds a lot of freshness to his design and really makes him stand out from the rest of the giants. Unfortunately, the colours aren't all that contrasting, with the yellows and reds not looking all that well apart from one another. And ultimately, because his gameplay is so similar to Trick Happy, so mashing based and so reliant on, you know, the finger pellets, despite the strategy behind it, can make it really lame and very repetitive, so he's not all that fun because of it, and because he is so similar to other Skylanders that perform the button mashing idea so much more effectively, and with greater execution and more fun to go alongside it. It just makes Bouncer, in comparison, feel far lamer and not as cool to play as, mind you. Now at 115 we have Trap Shadow. I love this design, but unfortunately I haven't really played with the figurine all that much, and for little I have played with him, his gameplay seems interesting, but not all that fun. You know, he's got an interesting array of moves that definitely makes him feel fresh in comparison to the other Skylanders, but they aren't that powerful. They don't feel all that cool to utilize and to play with. But hey, his designers take full advantage of his swap skill and the fact that, you know, he looks sneaky, he is sneaky, so him being of a sneak class makes sense and everything. So it definitely is fun to be had in that category, though unfortunately, you know, his lack of efficiency in combat just makes a lot of potential for this character and his gameplay lost in concept. But at 114, we have Enigma. I love this design so much. The clear plastic, the hood is really cool, though unfortunately, you know, you can literally stick your hand inside the hood because the whole idea is that he has no face. But I would have preferred it, him still having the blackened face, you know, no sort of facial features whatsoever, so that then, you know, it's far more satisfying to rub your hand along because it's so poorly textured, sticking your hand inside the hood and not feeling anything there. And this means that this character has no personality. Why would you want to play with a character that just has no personality? Sure, he has a cool weapon and a really cool clear cloak, but the fact that, you know, he has no personality to go around just makes him so boring to play as, even with a fun moveset. Now, at 113, we have Mr. Cat. A huge surprise for me, since Mr. Cat is very, very powerful. For orbs that you can fire from your staff are very, very fun to utilize from afar. The personality of this character is really cool. The mystery behind the gender is even cooler. Although I don't like the fact that, you know, there's 4 legs, you know, it's a mix of a horse and a cat, you know, another centaur type design. It's got the same weaknesses as Nightmare and the lack of maneuverability and just how inefficient Mr. Cat becomes in combat when you're not fighting from afar, because the hitbox is far too large, mind you. I do love the double ganger effect, but unfortunately it has been done to death in Skylanders, you know, the ability to clone oneself. So once again, that feels quite lame and derivative of other better Skylanders, so that doesn't help the Skylander stand out in the slightest, meaning that 113 is a perfect slot for it, mind you. Now at 112, we have Flipwreck. I like the pacing of this character. He's pretty fun. The animations are great as well, and the weaponry here, you know, a steering wheel and then, you know, a sawtooth type blade is something really cool that makes this character really, really stand out. So unfortunately, this character has no personality whatsoever, and I don't like 50% of his gameplay. You know, it's fun to ride on his wheel, even though the wheel itself doesn't do any damage, despite the fact that it's spinning and being on top of a wave should do something more than just, you know, take away your maneuverability, make it even easier for you to hit. And there's only one path where really if this increased maneuverability is utilized to your advantage, is you can spray fish out of it. So normally I just stick to the sword combos, which aren't nearly powerful enough and don't justify you having to get so up close and personal enemies with it, making this guy very inefficient in combat because it's so easy for him to get hit and killed by enemies, meaning the fun is often short-lived. Now at 111 we have Wall Up. I love the fact that, you know, you can just hold the square button to win. Very similar to Drobot, you know, it's so fun to cause such havoc and destruction and know that you are the one doing it, mind you. And not to mention Wall Up also has a really unique gameplay style, you know. It's similar to Frino in concept, which definitely draws this kind of down and makes them feel more generic and stand out much less. But in execution, it's far superior, since each of the moves are unique to the Skylander and really emphasize Wallop's personality. Although I don't like the shape of the figurine, you know, it's far too bulky, not nearly detailed enough, and just isn't that nice of a figurine nor designed to go around. I would have loved to have seen this personality and this gameplay given to a much more fleshed out, better shaped design, mind you. I'm not fat shaming, I'm just saying that a bulky Skylander like this just doesn't really work to me. It doesn't contrast with other Skylanders all that nicely, it doesn't blend in all that well either, so it's just not really a Skylander in my eyes. But at 110 we have Night Shift. This guy's cool because he has multiple lives. He's the first one to do it, which means that any Skylanders after him felt generic and derivative. But apart from that, his bite is far too close and personal, which means that sure, whilst it deals a lot of damage and heals you up, you know, you've took more damage than you've healed by even trying to get close enough to your enemies. And the cooldown on it is ridiculous, and the punches aren't nearly powerful enough to justify them being a mainstream attack for this character. But hey, he has really cool movement options with the fact that he teleports so easily and so quickly, and the multiple lives definitely does help out his case. And he's such a cool design as well, you know, for whole vampire ghost boxer-esque aesthetic is something really cool to see and very unique amongst all the other Skylanders, and it still fits in with them in the process. At 109 we have Scratch. I love the contrast and colours of this character. I love the wings. It really adds a lot to the design, makes it feel more mystical and more cartoony. And I also love the personality here, the fact that she's so luck-based even, which suits the culture she's based off of. So the culture enrichment you feel when playing with this character, and the reward there is very sweet. Though unfortunately her gameplay is her main downside because it's not fun. Once again, it's generic and derivative since other Skylers have the exact same moves and do it much better than her in terms of execution and power too. She's unfortunately not all that powerful, and because of that she's not well paced, she's not effective in combat, and just not that much of a fun unit to utilise in my personal opinion. Now, at 108, we have Rocky Roll. I should have put him at number 1 for the sake of the memes, but unfortunately, besides the memes, there isn't much to go around with this character. Sure, he's powerful, he's got some really awesome projectile-based attacks, and the Reposes, how you can spin it around you, and then as you jump, send it around in all corners, makes him very effective in combat, since, you know, you can hit all enemies around him all at once, and it's very, very powerful and deals with enemies very, very quickly. But unfortunately, the animations for that are quite weak, and the movement options for this character is also terrible, since, you know, you have Rocky to roll about on top of, so because of that there's just such little movement and such terrible pacing during combat scenarios, making this character not very fun, except for when you're taking the mickey out of him to create some memes, mind you. At 107 we have Snapshot. He's really unique amongst the Trapmasters, since, you know, he has a weapon that has a double function, a sword and a bow and arrow. That's really cool in concept and really cool in gameplay too. It's fun how you can maintain your distance and get in some very powerful projectiles in order to take down your enemies. His jumping animation is unique and really cool to see, though unfortunately in the gameplay itself, you know, a sword smash and a bow and arrow fired from afar, man, it is generic. Other Skylers have the exact same moves and just take more full advantage of that move concept, and because of that they feel far more unique and fleshed out than what Snapshot does. 106 is Gusto. I like how his moves combo together very nicely. I like the fact that he has a Traptanian boomerang. It's a very unique concept, and the fact that the boomerang is so giant, it adds a lot to the personality of the character, and he's really fun to play as, in my personal opinion, even if a lot of people don't seem to like him for some reason. His sucking ability is very derivative of Jetvac, and unfortunately it takes him even longer to suck up enemies, spit them back out, or heal them up from them being inside his belly. And it literally is just a combination of Slobbertooth and Jetvac done right, so I don't appreciate the genericness. And his design is kind of lame too. It's a little too cartoony, even for Skylanders. You know, for shirtlessness behind it just leaves a bad taste in my mouth, because same thing with Kaboom. I don't like the shirtlessness to it. So there definitely could have been a lot more incorporated into the design here. The gameplay could have been a little bit fun, but it is fluent and fun to utilize still, and I love that giant boomerang weapon. It's really unique and distinctive for the character. Now at 105 we have Super Gulp Big Bubble Pop Fizz. Actually no, it's just Big Bubble Pop Fizz. I have no idea where I got the Super Gulp from. I'm pretty sure that's the name they had in Swap Force. But regardless, this version of Pop Fizz pales to the original in every single way. His trumpet has really repetitive, really tedious sound effects to it. His beast mode, whilst being infinite, is really nerfed in comparison to that of the original Pop Fizz, so that's far less fun to even utilise. The animations are far worse in this case as well. And I have no idea why in his artwork, you know, he has a potion when potions aren't even incorporated into his gameplay in the slightest. So because of that, he feels far too different from the Pop Fizz we all know and love. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So ultimately, I don't like the addition of a trumpet. It doesn't add enough to the design for it to be warranted. It doesn't change up the gameplay enough, and I hate the fact that we have an infinite beast mode, which just isn't as powerful as regular beast. The whole idea about the regular beast from the original core is that it's short, it's sweet, and it's total savage. This beast mode, because it's far less powerful, it just has that less savage nature to it, and because of that, it's far less fun to utilize. At 104, we have Golden Queen from Imaginators, which she's definitely a very powerful unit. Great at standing by and defeating your enemies from afar, which can be kind of boring because, you know, you never get to stare down your enemies before you defeat them. It feels rather cheap and lame, a lame way to take them down and out. Although Golden Queen's jump from being a completely digital villain into being a full-fledged figurine is something really cool to see. She's got great texture in. Though unfortunately, because she's so golden, her colours don't contrast all that well, so unfortunately she's not that great of a Skylander to look at. But hey, she does have that really awesome ranged gameplay for variety in gameplay. A really great jump from Trap Team to Imaginators. And a really great personality as well. The voice acting really brings out a lot of energy and charisma for the character at hand. But for 103, we have Chopscotch. Yeah, again, another excellent utilization of voice to bring her personality and her character to life. Though I don't like the fact that she's once again a glorified orb with a ponytail and a massive axe. Although the massive axe brings so much personality to the character. And it's so fun to have such a tiny opponent wield such a massive axe to absolutely pulverize your enemies with. That concept behind her is fun, and I love how detailed she is. You know, she might be an orb like Wrecking Ball, but at least she has more details implemented into the design, and it takes more advantage of her small size. Because they give her the giant axe to really present her with a great personality, so they take full advantage of the size and shape of this design, unlike they did with other lame characters like a Ruptor or a Wrecking Ball with the exact same shape and laziness put into the design. But, you know, Chopscotch is the complete opposite of that. Her design isn't lazy and it's far more detailed, and therefore it works a whole lot better putting Chopscotch all the way up to 103. But at 102 we have Nightfall. What a freaking cool design. Her hair trailing all the way down to the base, allowing her to be suspended in midair. That's the kind of thing, genius type design, you know, for illusion of levitation that I would have liked to have seen from Lightning Rod. Nightfall also truly feels like a dark Skylander, with her colour palette being very contrasting, yet at the same time having the dark blues and purples and blacks to truly fit in with the dark element. Although unfortunately her design is far too serious and mature, you know, it's not nearly cartoony enough, so she doesn't feel like a Skylander on a design standpoint. And her gameplay, whilst being really fun, is once again derivative of Stealth Elf, since she's so sneaky based. You know, she sneaks into a dark orb and then attacks enemies when they least expect it. Though that's a greater expression of her personality, and so I suppose there is that to appreciate. More so than Stealth Elf, but Stealth Elf did it first and did it better, needless to say. And Nightfall just easily could have been better if she was more powerful in game. You know, her gameplay might be fun, but it's not powerful, so her gameplay is often short-lived and very frustrating to utilize. Now, at 101, we have Starcast. Unfortunately, his shurikens are a generic weapon to go with and are very weak in comparison to the other senseis. His movement is terrible. You know, he might be able to ride on top of a star, but the floatiness to it is horrid. And, you know, even his double ganger abilities is generic and not that fun to utilize since they're weak, and because of that, you know, he's yet again another sensei that's very short-lived due to the large hitbox, not being able to defeat enemies very quickly. And the only upside to this character really is the contrast between the gold, the blues, and the blacks, and the fact that this character looks so damn cool in his design. He might have 4 arms, but this is easily the greatest execution of this design concept. And the fact that his body is made of stars and gives him that intergalactic feeling just adds more atmosphere when you play as a character. This is one of the only characters in Skylanders that actually has some sort of atmosphere to them and personality, so that's fun to utilize, even if the gameplay itself is not. But at 100, we have Spyro. I felt like this was the perfect place to put Spyro because his gameplay is kind of lame. He shoots out fireballs, charges, and then wastes a tertiary attack on a flight ability. You know, it's not nearly powerful enough, it's not nearly fresh enough in comparison to the other Skylanders. He's not a fun Skylander, but what he represents is incredible. You know, he represents the start of this franchise, he represents a nostalgia for a lot of people. He introduced this game to a lot of OG Spyro fans, which absolutely hate this game because of redesign, so I suppose that's left a bad taste in my mouth for this character. And so overall, I just wish his gameplay was either more powerful or, you know, his tertiary attack was replaced for, like, something that could change up the elemental abilities of his breath, so then he could fire out lightning and life-based attacks, a bit like how we could in the Legend of Spyro series. That would have been something nice to see. And I would have liked to have seen more Reposes, because there was so much more potential behind this character they could have explored, but they just didn't. So the fact that the Skylanders, the developers, kind of forgot about this character, just, it makes him seem more forgettable. Like, if it wasn't the fact that the first game is named after him, and the fact that he received so much hate from the OG Spyro fans, and the fact that, you know, he's based on a pre-existing property, I feel like he would have been a very forgettable Skylander if he was an original Skylander. And that's just not good, really. But coming in at 99 before you guys absolutely start roasting me and, you know, hanging me at the stake, so we're going to move on to Voodoo, which I really love this guy's design. You know, he's an orcish type turtle with a dragon skull as a helmet, which of course I have a bad taste with because I love dragons, so having a dragon skull as a helmet, I don't like that. But the rest of his design, really cool. He's got a really awesome axe, you know, it's so cool in execution. The fact that, you know, they can take a generic weapon like an axe, make it so it has a zipline incorporated into it and look unique in comparison to other axes we're traditionally used to. His colour palette is really contrasting, and his gameplay is really fun too. It's very fast paced when you use zip lines with other enemies and then start slashing them up close, although unfortunately it's very ineffective because it's so easy to get hit due to the up close and personal attacks. His animations are also really fun to watch as well, with them being so well animated. And overall, I find his character very average and only slightly better than Spyro. But now at 98 we have High Five. This guy's most certainly well paced. You know, his dashing ability is very fun, very fast utilised, though unfortunately it has a lot of input lag. You know, sometimes you accidentally press a button 3 times and then the ability is of course carried out 3 times, but you know, you only intended to do it twice, but because the animation is taking so long, it's got such a long wind up and cooldown, you wind up pressing it too many times, performing too many dashes, and that becomes very frustrating very quickly. So, you know, the input scheme for this character isn't all that effective, and neither is the gameplay itself. It's very, very weak. So, you know, it might be fun to utilise and it might be well paced, but the fact that this character dies so easily and has that terrible, frustrating input type operations behind it just takes away a lot of the fun you can have with this character and makes his fun awfully short-lived as he dies far too quickly, mind you. At number 97, we have Stump Smash. This character is absolutely saved by his Series 2 Wild Power, allowing him to spit several nuts simultaneously, well, not even simultaneously, just in a row, one after the other, consistently was the word I was looking for. It means that this guy has some great ranged options, some great up close and personal options as you unleash your true power and might. This character has a lot of power when he slams his hands down, and that's very well captured. Though unfortunately his design is kind of generic. You know, he's a tree with, you know, stumps as hammers. Yeah, even explaining it makes the design itself sound pretty lame, and that's the main downfall for Stump Smash, really, despite how powerful his gameplay can be and how awesomely integrated into his main moveset that WoW Power can be. But at 96, we have Stealth Elf. She's powerful, she's fast, she's fun, she's full to brim with personality. She has a unique strategy to her, which, you know, encourages a different play style of a character and makes her feel fresh every single time you play with her. It's easy to see why she's a fan favourite, though personally I have grown bored of her. We saw so many iterations of her, so many variants, that she became really dull, repetitive and tedious after a while, seeing so many versions of her, especially when there were other live characters to constantly bring back. So I kind of wish Stealth Elf wasn't done to death by the developers, because then I could have probably appreciated her more. At number 95, I felt like utilising Lightning McQueen's 95 here was appropriate and quite hilarious, so that's why it's there. But regardless, we have Cobra Kadabra. Now, this guy is all based around rhythm, but unfortunately his rhythm is so hard to keep up with and distracts you from the main gameplay taking place, so he's not a very investing character, and can be very frustrating because his rhythm is needlessly difficult to keep up with, though he does sound very cool, being so music-based and incorporating music into his design in such a unique, clever way, mind you. That's something very, very nice to see. I quite enjoy the rhythm aspect to it, and it creates good pacing too. Though unfortunately, a lot of his moves are an absolute waste. I like his snake, sure, but his tertiary attack, I forget what it even is. Yet alone utilize it on a regular basis, and he just doesn't have much personality either. So this character is a real mixed bag, making 95 a perfect spot for him. But at number 94, we have Eyebrawl. I hate how defenseless his giant armored body is once his eye leaves his head, mind you, and I hate the pacing that creates since the eye moves so fast but the rest of the body moves so slow. I wish you could move the eye so you have some sort of good pacing and then have the body teleport back to it, so then this character wasn't so slow. But hey, his animations look cool, and he definitely has some fluent gameplay. You know, the eye detaching from the body is a really unique mechanic to the character. Very well animated, and he's just a lot of fun to play as. You know, his gameplay is fun, it's fresh in comparison to the other giants. And when Skylanders Giants was first announced, everyone was intrigued as to what the undead giant would look like, because they know they could do so many unique things with an undead as a giant, and they absolutely nailed it with Eyebrawl. But moving on to number 93, we have Freeze Blade, a very well-paced character. You can knock enemies back and then go in with projectiles, or freeze them up and go in with projectiles too. Unfortunately, the freezing here is once again derivative of Slam Bam, making this character feel less fresh and unique in comparison, and more lazy in the gameplay department. And the freeze isn't taken full advantage of, because with Slam Bam, you know, you utilize the freeze, and you know, you have to time it and aim it. With Freeze Blade, all you have to do is aim it because it's a projectile attack, and then with Slam Bam, you have to go in close to deal melee damage, which is such a unique strategy, and it's so fluent. But with Freeze Blade, you know, you freeze an enemy, and then you can just remain from a distance to hit them with your frisbee. You know, taking away the meleeness of it is, you know, what made Slam Bam so unique and cool. So having that exact same concept, but losing what made the concept great, ultimately makes Freeze Blade kind of lame in that regard. Regardless, his design is awesome, his gameplay is fast-paced, and it's fun, with the exception of the Ice Blast being such a waste of an attack. So that's the only weakness I have behind Freeze Blade, mind you. And at 92, we have Blastertron, yet another fast-paced character. Staying back from a distance to fire your bombs through a firewall to deal increased damage is just a really cool concept, and it's really fun to take full advantage of. And then charging straight through enemies with sheer speed and power due to his rocket abilities is something that's also really fun to pull off, mind you, and very satisfying. I don't like how his design is, you know, fire encased in armor. It's very derivative and generic of a design. Well, I wouldn't even say generic, just derivative, since other Skylanders have utilized this design and have utilized it to full advantage, unlike this one, aka Igniter. You don't just copy my favorite Skylander, do a half-assed job with it, and get let off the hook that easily. But fortunately for Blastoon, his gameplay is so fun that I can just kind of allow the nitpick of his lame and generic design that doesn't really stand out all that well amongst the other Skylanders because it's been done before and been done better. Just snip away. Plus, this character has no personality. You know, if you're gonna have a fiery spirit encased in some enchanted armor, you know, give him some damn personality at least. But coming in at 91, we have Dr. Frickin' Crankcase from Imaginators, of course. This character's really fast-paced, he has a lot of personality, the voice acting really brings that personality to life with a lot of energy and charisma. His attacks combo together very, very well, making it feel fluent and fast-paced. So unfortunately, once again, they're not as powerful as other senseis. And the hat attack just isn't really all that useful unless you go down the hat's path, mind you. So that being an absolute waste of an ability makes this character just feel less fun and less varied whilst you're playing with him, despite how fun the personality is. So at least he's an investing character due to that charisma and energy you feel whilst playing as him. But coming in at number 90, we have a Skarner, which I know a lot, and I mean a lot of you would put much, much lower on this list. I like Chop Chop at the end of the day. It's got really cool design. The blend of, you know, a skeleton and Archean armor is a lot, allows for a lot of lore and intrigue to be placed behind him. But apart from that, you know, a sword and a shield, what a generic weapon set to go with for Skarners, and the shielding ability is completely worthless. I hardly ever use it. You know, I don't shield bash enemies because you need to be so close, and yet it's so weak, you're better off utilising the sword anyway. The sword animations and combos are really fluent and really fun to watch and absolutely annihilate your enemies with. That's what makes Chop Chop so fun, the actual chopping part of it. And the Bone Brambler is a good way to balance out Chop Chop's abilities, to give him some sort of range to go alongside the meleeness of him. He's awfully slow-paced as well. Sure, he has some great sound effects as he's walking along, and the clankiness you hear from his armor, but that doesn't take away from how slowly he walks and how poorly paced he is because of it. So ultimately, if his shield had more function and was more powerful as you bash your enemies in with it, Chop Chop easily could have become a better Skarner for it, but as it stands at the moment, that's just the main weakness that really ruins Chop Chop for me. It either makes or breaks him for you. A lot of people, it totally makes it for him. They love his shielding ability. I, however, don't. But at 89, we have Trigger Happy. I love the fact that you can butt mash with this character and then just watch as bullets go everywhere. It's very chaotic as a player, and the fact that Trigger Happy has the chaotic wild personality to go alongside it makes him feel so fleshed out and fun. Unfortunately, his design is pretty lame, you know. Once again, he's that glorified orb shape with long arms, long ears, and a tongue sticking out to emphasize that personality. So I'm glad that they was able to give so much personality to an orb, a glorified orb of all things. So I hate the shape of the design, but I love the execution of it, and I love the fact that his gameplay is so personality driven and so fun as a player to utilize, you know, just mashing buttons. And he's a very well balanced character too, because both of his paths are as good as one another. And the flipping of a coin is just such a unique gameplay element, you know. It really takes advantage of animations, unique ones, and unique attacks. It makes Trigger Happy feel fresh and unique in comparison to other Skarners, though he's still not the best, which is why he's at 89, mind you. But at 88, we have Thrillipede. I love the fact that you have different animations for when you throw your grenades at enemies, no matter which way you're facing them. You know, you can face completely away from them and then throw grenades over your shoulder, and then, you know, you can throw them around the side of you if they're at a 90-degree angle to you, or you can throw them directly in front if they're right in front of your face, mind you. You create strategy and makes this Skarner very effective at running away. So I love Thrillipede's unique approach to combat, in the fact that, you know, you have his grenades and for his unique form of throwing them, for animations behind it, the personality it creates, and his jumping is so cool. He literally just kind of like dives forward. It's so unique to the character, making him truly stand out from an in-game point especially. His design is so cool. His forearms are so unique in comparison to other Skarners, which don't just utilize it to punch or only throw a few shurikens at once. Like, seriously, Starcast has 4 shurikens. You think he would be much faster at throwing them? But Thrillipede, you know, throws his grenades so fast. He punches with almost all of them. In fact, I do think he utilizes all of them to punch, actually. So I'm lying at that. Otherwise, regardless, you know, it's just a great execution of this design concept, and makes this character a lot of fun to play as, and very unique in terms of his animations especially. Now, 87 is Treadhead. He's very well paced, although it can become an absolute nuisance and very frustrating when you burn out. The fact that that's even an option with this character once you're fully upgraded is ridiculous. You know, there shouldn't be a downside to a Skarner that leaves him this vulnerable, and just you know, staying still for as long as you are. When you're playing games, you know, you want to be interacting with it, you want to be having fun, you want to be charging for enemies, you don't want to be standing around waiting for Shredhead to pick himself back up after a burnout. Though, the fact that you can take advantage of this, and just before a burnout, you can risk it all in order to really off a ramp, slam back down, create an awesome animation, a very unique attack to Shredhead, and a risk and reward-esque factor makes him very intense and fast-paced to play with. And his figurine design is so cool, it really stands out due to the machinery and the techery behind it. He truly feels like a tech Skylander with very contrasting colours, mind you. Again, I just wish he didn't have that burnout, really, to make him even more fast-paced than what he had, potentially, mind you. But moving on to 86, we have Funny Bone. His projectiles are so powerful, and the fact that he chases his frisbees in order to pick it up and slam it down gives him such great personality, because he links into being a dog much more than what Hot Dog does. So taking full advantage of the animal that they're going with right here and incorporating that into the personality and the design and the gameplay of the character just makes this character feel so fleshed out and awesome. His name is great because, you know, you have a funny bone as a human, so do dogs, and, you know, this guy's made of bone, so calling him Funny Bone makes sense. And, you know, he's just so personality driven and so fleshed out as a character and so powerful. On top of that, his buzzsaw does take a little bit too long to activate and cool down, mind you. It leaves him far too vulnerable for sure, but for the frisbees and the hands more to make up for that. And the fact that, you know, you can throw a frisbee into a paw and the paws reflected between them is so unique and cool to watch and follow before you as an animation, on an animation standpoint, mind you. So therefore, I really enjoy Funny Bone. But coming in at 85, we have Boom Bloom. I love how well her attacks chain together. You know, you can create some spores and then make them more powerful by some whip slashes. I don't like the fact that, you know, she has a whip as a ninja-based weapon, especially when as a ninja imaginator, you can't get that whip as a weapon. So, you know, for weapon, it doesn't make any sense for her battle class. In fact, her battle class is completely taken advantage of in any element of her gameplay, her personality. You know, she's not sneaky in any form or another, you know. So why the heck she's a ninja and not a brawler, I have no clue. They could have easily fleshed out the idea of her being a ninja. And I also would have liked to have seen more powerful moves, you know, whilst they certainly are well animated and fun to chain together. For fun doesn't disguise the fact that she is much weaker in comparison to other senseis, so as such you want to play with the senseis that are far more destructive than her. But coming in at 84, we have Aurora, very well paced, very quick, especially with her dashing abilities. But once again, she's a bit too weak on the power side. You prefer playing as other more powerful senseis, despite the sheer amount of pacing and fun you can have with this character. She's very well voice acted, brings a lot of personality to the character, and it's ultimately her backstory that really invests you into her character, since she's the niece of Eon, which is a really unique spin to take for her design and personality that truly emphasise that about her, since, you know, she has Eon embedded on her chest and, you know, is constantly talking about Master Eon in her one-liners, mind you. So once again, a very mixed bag. If she had more powerful attacks, she easily could have escalated down this list, mind you. But coming in at 83, we have Chill. I love her Ice Wall attacks. I love the fact that you can fire off your projectiles into them to split them up and create further projectiles with it. I love the fact that the shield bash moves them around, creates some great movement for Chill, and makes it really fun. She has a great personality with some really great ice puns, which makes sense since she's such an ice-oriented character, mind you. And she's a character that surprised me, you know. Her design, kind of lame, you know. She's a human with armor that has contrasting colours to it, sure, but, you know, it's just a human in armor, in other words. But they take full advantage of that design by giving you some really personality-driven one-liners and some really fun gameplay to go alongside it. But coming in at 82, we have Bash. I am sorry, all of you Crash the Skylands fans, and of course Crash the Skylands yourself, for putting Bash all the way at 82. But unfortunately, with his Rock Fist, whenever I, you know, try to tail slam it, it never seems to activate for melee, for projectile ability, and that's the only projectileness that this character has. Everything else is so melee oriented. Sure, he's very, very powerful up close and personal and defeats most enemies in one hit, so you don't even need to worry about getting so close to them. But when you have enemies and Trap Team especially, you know, and it's so difficult to defeat them because you've got to get so up close and personal, and that puts you at such great risk of being hit. It just makes this Skarner such a risk and reward type Skarner that isn't satisfying. You know, you take all of the risk in playing him, and there just isn't a reward there, really. Sure, hitting and defeating an enemy in one hit is satisfying, but you know, you've got to be patient with this character, and I like fast-paced characters, not being patient with characters. Sure, he has some great movement, especially in his Series 2 iteration, where, you know, you can take full advantage of that wow power as, you know, you roll into a crowd of enemies, initiate it, and roll back out again. That's some really great movement, and adds a lot to the pacing of a character, for sure, but whenever you're not utilising that wow power, and, you know, want to go in guns a-blazing and take full advantage of Bash's melee-based attacks, it requires patience, risk, little reward, and not much fun to go around. And, you know, he's a rock dragon. Big deal. It's not that great of a design. You know, there are far better dragons with much greater wing design, much more detail placed into them. So overall, Bash, whilst being a great character, is not quite top tier material. But coming in at 81, we have Rattleshake. Now, I love this guy's poison pellets. You know, it makes him very effective from afar. For irony, as him utilizing a snake gun, whilst being a snake himself, adds a lot of personality to the character. They take full advantage of his swap skills, since it makes sense for his design, for his gameplay. I love the hat on top of him, you know, it adds more personality, and makes his design feel more fleshed out. And the fact that, you know, you can have your little snake buddies deal damage to enemies and slow them down whilst you finish them off with, you know, either a charged up snaking ability that, you know, bounces around walls like crazy and creates absolute chaos, or, you know, just hit them usually with your regular poison gun. It's really, really fun, but can get very repetitive and tedious after a while. You know, there's only really one strategy to utilize with this guy that can become quite boring after a while, and unfortunately the attacks of the bottom half themselves, whilst taking full advantage of the design, aren't all that fun to utilize. So not a big fan of that either, making only really 2/3 of Rattleshake great and not really worthy of getting any low on the list then right here. But at number 80 we have Deep Dive Gilgrunt, not as great as regular Gilgrunt obviously, because he's much less projectile based, making him far less powerful and effective in combat. However, his melee attacks, how fluent they are, how well animated they are, how fleshed out they are, in terms of the developers' craft being put into this character, you know, it shows that they were passionate about bringing this character to life, giving him a lot of personality and making him feel fun. We're off priority, it feels, so all of those things came true. You know, he's fun, it's fluent to chain combo attacks together, which is what makes him so fun. It's just such a shame that he's not really as ranged as he could have been, and he's not really all that upgraded from the original Gilgrunt. You know, he has flippers and a slightly new armor set added to him, but really, and they changed up his weapon too, but really that's all there is to it. You know, they could have expanded upon Gilgrunt's base design in so much more interesting and unique ways than just giving him new armor, mind you, and a new weapon. So that's also kind of lame to him, I suppose. But moving on to 79, we have Double Dare Trigger Happy, which takes the original Trigger Happy design and makes it 10 times more awesome. You know, you have his new costume, which looks so damn cool and very character driven, especially with him winking at you. For fire surrounding the gun, it's just a really nice addition, adding more detail to the figurine and making them more fun on a textural level. The gameplay is great as always. You know, you still have the button mashing chaoticness of Trigger Happy, but you can combine that with sparks that go all around you, further conveying Trigger Happy's wild personality and just making it more effective in taking down groups of enemies. Because, you know, before with regular Trigger Happy, it's very hard to deal with enemies that are coming at you from all angles, but with this Trigger Happy, you know, it's so much more easier to do so, and that makes him more fun. It makes him even more wild. And I adore this version of Trigger Happy, and I haven't even fully upgraded him yet, so that goes to show how great of a character this is, if he's so powerful and so character driven from an upgrade chamber that isn't even full just yet. But at number 78 we have Food Fight. For contrasting greens, is very cool to see, you know, the lighter greens from the top of the figurine and the darker greens from the lower side of the figurine is really cool. Once again, I love the irony with Food Fight being made of food and then utilizing food as a weapon. I love Skylanders that utilize something similar to themselves as a weapon. You know, the irony behind that is always fun and adds a lot of intrigue behind the design. Food fights gameplay is really fun too. Shooting tomatoes at enemies, you know, pushing enemies back with your anchovy attack, creating explosive spores into the ground. It adds strategy to the character because, you know, you can create a line of traps with your spores, or, you know, you can choose to fire your tomatoes from a distance and then bring in the anchovy attack as they get close and personal to finish them off with the tomato attacks. It makes the Skylander feel fresh, pun intended, and well-paced, so to say, and very fun because of all those factors taken into account. But at number 77, we have Ember. She has some really great combos that are very well animated, fun to pull off, and very, very fluent with one another. That makes her well-paced, obviously. Her design is freaking awesome. She's a samurai for crying out loud, and I love samurai, so it really enriches your culture, once again, specifically Japanese culture, especially with a double blade, which is taken full advantage of in her animations and her gameplay, so she truly feels like a sentinel and takes full advantage of having been put in that class. Her colours are very contrasting. And overall, I just love the design here and how fluent and powerful her gameplay is. Well, I say powerful, whilst it's fluent, fun to watch and fun to utilize, mind you, especially with the pacing. It's not nearly as powerful as it should have been since it's so melee based, so I wish getting up close and personal with enemies could have resulted in far more powerful hits, mind you. It's far too easy for Ember to be defeated at the harder difficulties because it's far too easy for enemies to get in close to deal damage to you, because you need to get in close yourself for the sake of the melee damage. But moving on to 76, we have Kingpin. Yet again, some really awesome combos up this character's sleeve that are well animated and fun to pull off. He's a fast-paced character. Although he doesn't have much personality, I'm going to be perfectly honest. You know, he's definitely got a really cool voice that really suits the character, but unfortunately it doesn't convey much personality. It is really cool to see a penguin Skylander with massive gauntlets, but except from the concept, the design itself isn't all that cool. I'm going to be honest. I don't enjoy the design that much, I suppose because I don't have that much of a connection to penguins. And, you know, not all of his moves are that fun. You might enjoy utilising the combos, but I personally don't like his drill ability nor his ice-based ability, and they are yet again very generic moves that other Skylanders pull off far more effectively and in more unique and fresh ways than what this character does. So therefore, this character has a lot to be decided while still being incredibly awesome, fun to watch and fun to play as, which definitely nets him for 76 spot. But at 75, we have Hoot Loop, another fan favourite to a lot of you, and it's easy to see why he has a lot of personality. There's a great strategy to him, especially with your teleportation, since you can leave yourself vulnerable whilst trying to teleport, but at the same time you can utilise it to draw in enemies and then headbutt them as you teleport. His staff and the fact that, you know, he has multiple orbs that circle around before hitting enemies makes them very well animated, although the staff itself isn't as powerful as it needs to be, and the hallucination effect is down for wrong path. Far too small of a radius, far too slow. It really decreases the pace of a Skylander, and ultimately is a waste of an attack, so that's not fun to see, mind you. And I don't like the sound effects either. You know, the owl effects get very repetitive and annoying after a while, even if they are so character driven, with, of course, you know, them being owl sound effects and Hoot Loop himself being an owl. So it makes sense, and it's kind of fun at first, but it does get repetitive and tedious after a while, all of the owl effects, mind you. But coming in at 74, we have Ghost Roaster. This guy's powerful, this guy's fast, and he has a perfect blend of the two. His design is very unique amongst other Skylanders, since it's far more horror-based. It looks like something ripped out of one of the developers' nightmares, which is something very unique to see amongst the rest of the cast of Skylanders that are normally quite cute and child-friendly. Unfortunately, this makes it so that then the texture isn't all that fun. The physical figurine isn't that fun to rub your hands along with because it's so swashbuckler based, given it's such a thin body. So he has the same problems with his posing as what Blastermind does. It's not fun to pick up because it's just so thin and generically laid out. But I just love this guy's gameplay so much, despite the fact that his tertiary attack, once again, is a waste. I don't need invulnerability, and I don't need invulnerability that deals damage to me. What if I press it by accident and it's dealt damage to me? You know, I'm much better off utilising his ghostly charging based attack, you know, where he turns into his skull and charges at enemies, which is very personality driven, especially with laughter, mind you. Once again, adding to that horror based atmosphere the character generates. But ultimately, defeating enemies with that down the right path heals you up, so I'm far more happy with that. And, you know, if I get hit by enemies, no big deal. I can just defeat them with the ghostly skull-based attack and then heal up from it. See, I don't like this guy's tertiary attack, but hey, he is my dad's favourite Skarner, which means that, you know, surely the developers got something right when designing this character. Regardless, number 73 is Dinorang. Really cool design here. He's a freaking Australian dinosaur T-Rex thing. You know, it's got a lot of character behind it. His gameplay is really fun. The boomerangs, you know, how you can either have them circulate around you for defense or fire them off in front of you for offense. It's a great blend of the two and makes them really fun to utilize on the gameplay scale. Though unfortunately, he's very slow paced since his boomerangs are quite slow and, you know, don't really encourage going up close and personal with enemies, making his twin boomerangs, unfortunately, completely worthless most of the time because you don't have a range in which to deal for damage. And he has such a slow walking speed, making getting from area to area an absolute slog, so I don't appreciate the speed of this character. And ultimately, with that speed being improved and, you know, a slightly better range up on the twin boomerangs could have easily elevated this character on the list. But moving on to 72, we have Countdown. This guy has so much personality. I love the fact that his miniature bombs blow up and then deal knockback damage to enemies that you can utilize to your advantage to fire rockets off at them, and then his explosive head. Unfortunately, his soul gem, whilst being really cool in concept, is horrid in execution because you forget it exists. And it leaves you vulnerable for far too long and doesn't deal nearly enough damage to compensate for loss, for the vulnerability, mind you, of not having a head for that short amount of time. And plus, you know, detaching your head and blowing it up, awfully kind of, you know, gory for a kid's game. The idea of removing one's head, launching at enemies, and then blowing it up, and then killing your enemies with your own head that you've blown up. Sure, it's a literal bomb, and it's great for his personality, but still, a bit gory, a bit distasteful. And hey, the Lightcore takes full advantage of that by making his fuse light up, truly emphasizing that, you know, Countdown's literally blowing himself up here, and his with his self-destructive tendencies, adding more further distaste to him. So overall, definitely could have had more of this character, especially going into later games where he's just nerfed and nerfed and nerfed and nerfed. You know, where's the buffs at? Because sure, he's good in Swap Force, but he could have been better on the power level. And for mini bombs, besides being cute and creating that knockback, are completely worthless, so I wish they had more purpose. But at that, Countdown is an absolute favourite of mine, which is hilarious. It just goes to show how great the other 71 Skylines are if Countdown is as awesome as he is. And, you know, I have to come up with such minor nitpicks in order to deliver any flaws towards him. But regardless, 71 is Fling Kong. Very fast-paced character, this one, as he dashes. And then after a dash, you know, you can create more powerful frisbee attack. You know, you're pressing multiple buttons at once, taking full advantage of the fact that Skarners is a game. You interact with it by pressing buttons. So that's a lot of fun, mind you. I love the fact that it's very Aladdin-esque with, of course, kind of like Arabian-type armor. The fact that he's a monkey like Abu Abu and he's on a magic fine carpet, you know, the intertextuality there is really cool, even if it can come across as quite lazy. So the two perspectives you can have with this design are taken into account, and, you know, it can make the character quite frustrating. And he's also awfully forgettable because of it, you know. You kind of forget the character until you watch Aladdin and then realise, oh yeah, there was a Skylander that was inspired by this entire movie right here. So yeah, for forgettability and for lack of personality, so to say, is kind of lame for this character. But again, the fast-pacedness and the taking advantage of multiple button presses is ultimately what really invests you with this character and makes you want to play with him. Fling Kong. That adds to the forgettability of him, you know, since I constantly forget his name. But next up we have Bone Bash Roller Brawl. Clearly inferior to her regular roller brawler form because she's not as fast paced. Her gameplay isn't as fresh and fluent as the original roller brawl. Her design isn't as fun either. It sure does have a lot of bones surrounding it, but that's not what made the original roller brawl special. You know, the original roller brawl could stand on her own without necessarily heavy undead theming. This Skylander is so heavy on the undead theming that she almost doesn't feel like an undead Skylander anymore. You know, she feels too much like an undead Skylander is what I'm trying to say here. The irony in what I'm saying. Regardless, they definitely could have expanded upon Roller Brawl's design a whole lot more better, and they could have made her gameplay much better as well, with much better jumping attacks, greater animations, and more fast-paced attacks, mind you. But coming in at 69, funny number. But anyway, receiving for nice spot on the list is going to be Crash Bandicoot. Unfortunately, his attacks are weak, and whenever you come back from one of his extra lives, you come back with such little health to where, you know, you can only take one extra hit as it is, and, you know, his health is so low to begin with that it really burns through your lives, and once you take everything into account, he practically has the exact same life counter as other senseis, so, you know, having for weaker attacks really aren't justified. But what makes this guy so amazing, first of all, is the intertextuality. They absolutely nailed conveying Crash's personality from his own games in Skylanders. But what I also really love about this character is the gameplay. God, it's so fluent, so fun, so fast-paced. God, he is a brawler because his combos are so fun, so visually pleasing. Oh, and words cannot truly compensate for how much fun I have with this guy's combos, because just like Fling King, he takes advantage of multiple button presses and fully invests you into the game, and takes advantage of this being the medium at hand, with it being a game. But moving on, we have at 78 Fiesta. Now, the only reason why Fiesta is made at as low as 68 is his design alone. It's so cool, takes full advantage of Mexican culture, it's so fresh and unique in comparison to other Skylanders, and really stands out amongst the crowd while still maintaining that cartoony aesthetic that Skylanders is known for, to make him blend in with the Skylanders at the same time. But his gameplay, on the other hand, is incredibly weak. Sure, it's very personality-driven with his trumpet and his amigos and everything, and the fact that, you know, he can get rid of his body to go into just a head, you know, once again, it's further emphasis of the Mexican culture he's based off, and adds more to the design, since, you know, it truly does emphasize for design, for personality, which the design alludes to for sure. But the attacks themselves just aren't that powerful, unfortunately, so because of that, you don't really wind up playing with his character often, because more often than not, the moment you start playing with him, he's dead. Very ironic for an undead Skylander, but yes, the only thing that could have made this character even closer to perfection is with more powerful attacks, because unfortunately, you know, you might have a fantastic design to go around, one of Skylanders' best, but if your gameplay isn't powerful and isn't fun, then you kind of messed up, man. But moving on to 67, we have Fright Rider. Now, this guy has an awesome design for sure. I love the skeleton ostrich type thing, but this time around, the gameplay is absolutely nailed. I love the combos and how awesome they look in animations and stuff. I love the fluency in it, the pace as well. He's very well paced, since he can literally charge into battle, which adds a lot of personality to the character. And, you know, he has some unique attacks as well. The fact that he can make ostrich heads, you know, appear from down under the earth is very unique and well thought out, and really contrasting of other Skylanders. So I love this guy's design. I love the great pace he has in battle, the personality he has because of said pacing, and, you know, the moveset created for such powerful combinations, one that are fun to watch because they're so well animated, mind you. The main problem I have with this guy is maneuverability. You know, he's not very maneuverable, making him very easy to get hit in combat and lose health very quickly, and that's not helped out by his large hitbox either, so he's not really very effective in combat. even though he is most certainly fun to utilise, so that's the main downfall for this Skylander, most certainly. Now, 66, we have a superior version of Stealth Elf, Super Shot Stealth Elf. It maintains the strategy behind the regular Stealth Elf with the sneakiness behind it, you know, needing to sneak up towards your enemies. But the turret is so much fun. The fact that it locks up on enemies so that then you can continue firing whilst manoeuvring around them at 360 degrees is something that's really, really fun. For sure, and because it puts in your hands so much destruction, you always feel satisfied when playing as this character and causing that destruction that's unfolding before you on screen. So overall, absolutely the superior version of Stealth Elf, and I love the fact that you can knock back enemies with a very fast-paced, awesome-looking animation that's very satisfying to pull off, satisfying to watch, and of course, it's great for knocking back enemies so you can hit them further and create very effective combos. But at 65, we have Star Strike. You're constantly invested with this character, since this character you really need to concentrate to get good with, because it requires timing and rhythm, which is well paced, and as I said before, it keeps you on the edge of your seat as you're playing as her, constantly hooked, concentrated and invested in the game as you try to reflect your orbs to increase their power and constantly keep moving. So overall, Star Strike is an absolute blast because of that, and she makes the game even better since you're further invested in the game playing as her. And she's unique in Swap Force in the fact that she's the only character that can attack whilst jumping, so once again, that made her feel fresh and very distinctive amongst the cast of characters, and she doesn't have much personality to go around, sure, but the gameplay more than makes up for that with the fact that it's just so investing to constantly hit this orb back at enemies and, you know, create this rhythm and movement and pace with a character due to the reflective nature of her fans and the orbs that she reflects to create more power. But at 64, we have Scorp. Man, is this guy fast-paced. Unfortunately, his attacks are less powerful than other Swap Force cores, but the pacing makes up for that because, you know, you can knock back enemies with a rolling ability, or you can, you know, maneuver so fluently with it to get away from enemies. You know, you can Sting, taking full advantage of the fact that this guy is a scorpion, creating a very fleshed out design. It's not so personality driven, unfortunately, making him less of a fun character to interact with, but because his gameplay is so fun, you kind of forget that you're not really all that invested in him character, because then you also have his lobbing abilities, which have an awesome sound effect to go alongside it. You truly feel the orb as it's being lobbed out of your hand due to the sound effect and everything, making it an absolute blast to utilise, mind you. But coming in at 63, we have Punk Shock. Unfortunately, her gameplay is similar to Zap in the fact that, you know, she has an electrical device that can, and a water-based device, which when combined they can create, you know, an electrical field. But hey, she has a stunning ability, which means that she can stun all enemies around her, get their hell back, and then start blasting enemies whilst she sets up traps with her water balloons. Because the thing with Zap is that, you know, it was far less trap based. You could utilize it to run away and then spark it for sure, and, you know, trap enemies in a constant cycle with the Sea Slime slide. But Punk Shocks demands more strategy, and because of that it's more investing, because, you know, you've got to sit them out in front of you and then trick enemies into coming closer to them, or better yet, you know, you can set them up in front of you, walk towards it, create the tail slam in order to stun your enemies, and then they're stunned while still inside of the sparked up water, mind you. So their strategy for moves feel like they belong together much more than Zap. It takes Zap's basic gameplay concept and expands upon it. The design is amazing. The blues contrasting each other is very nice to see. It's a very eel-based design, so the electricity makes sense and feels very fleshed out. And overall, I have an absolute blast playing with Punk Shock, even if she is a little derivative and doesn't hold a candle to Zap with his awesome design and, you know, the backstories behind Zap and the awesomeness found with that. But at 62, we have a very underrated character, Prison Break. A lot of people hate this character, and I don't know why. First of all, with his Series 2, you know, you can bring down your crystals, reflect his lasers to deal damage to multiple enemies at once, but his Mega Beam you can create from his Wow Pow. By golly! You know, you can continue reflecting your beam through the crystals, but then you activate that mega laser, so now, you know, you're not only dealing damage to multiple enemies at once with reflective laser, but you're defeating them. You're dealing 200 damage apiece with a simple hit of a button to 6 or 7 enemies all at once. It is stupid broken and stupid satisfying as well, because it's not an easy maneuver to pull off. You need to be constantly invested in the character, because you need to think about angles, and so that adds concentration and strategy to the character, keeping you constantly invested and keeping the pace moving forward, because you're so satisfied by the destruction being carried out on screen. My one main weakness with this character is his design. He's a rock golem, big whoop. We have several of those in Skylanders already, so there definitely could have been much more uniqueness in the design of this character. You know, they could have added you know, things like belts or crystals. Well, he has crystals already. I mean, more crystals. You know, or maybe even just not even made him a rock golem whatsoever and give him guns that fired off lasers through his crystals instead. You know, that would have been far less generic than a rock golem, and because that he's also incredibly slow, so moving between area to area where there's no combat is an absolute slog with this character. But coming in at 61, we have Gear Shift. I love the fact that this character has so much variety within her gameplay. You know, she never gets boring or dull, because you're constantly utilizing a different strategy with her, whether you want to utilize her projectile attacks or her spin attack or her swashbuckler attack. So the fact that this Skylander is constantly varying things up makes it feel fresh, distinctive, and so much fun to utilize. You know, you can play with her for hours, but because you're constantly using different strategies, you know, you never truly feel the grind with it. And she's fast-paced too, with having her cartwheel-based abilities that she can even utilize to trap enemies and add strategy, since she leaves bolts behind, which can be maneuvered as you use your hula hooping ability. It makes everything feel connected and everything have purpose, and it just makes her such a fun character to utilize. Though unfortunately her design is a little less fun, with it being very generic, as she's yet another robot, and we've seen plenty of those already. Having both the Trapmasters as robots made them both really mesh together and not really contrast each other all that nicely, and made them both have the same problem, so to say. So that's just weak design work on the developers' behalf. But moving on to number 60, we have Lobstar. First of all, great pun for a great character right here. Second of all, his charging stars take no time whatsoever, and then once you unleash them, they deal 100 damage a pop. And it's so satisfying for that, because, you know, such a short charging window to create such a huge chunk of damage. Amazing. He's fast-paced because he has a charging ability. My main problem with him is his vulnerability during his boiling phase. It takes far too long in order for you to get the attack where he jumps up and then slams back down, dealing damage around him at 360 degrees. You know, the fact that he's vulnerable during this whole cycle and it takes far too long really takes away from the pacing of this character, because you've got to be patient with him more than anything. Sure, it's well animated and the character's design is so awesome, and there's the irony of him, you know, being a starfish and utilizing starfish as the main attack form. It makes his Traptanium weapons more unique as well to other Trapmasters, since there are no Trapmasters with any weapons like it, especially not when it comes to the irony behind the utilization of their weapons. So Lobstar going starfish mad is really, really fun. But again, I just don't like the mechanic of this boilingness. Sure, it's high risk, high reward, because, you know, you risk getting hit and leaving yourself vulnerable for the reward of getting boiled, getting those increased attacks, getting that increased speed, you know, getting that awesome animation and everything. But, you know, it doesn't stop the fact that it's not very entertaining to do so. And unfortunately, when you have regular starfish that you're just throwing at enemies, you know, without the charging ability or without having boiled up, it's very weak and very frustrating, in other words. So they're the main downfalls for Lobstar. But moving on to 59, we have Popthorn. He's very cute. That means you're constantly invested with this character because you love playing with the cute ones. He's got two forms, so this game takes full advantage of that by making his two forms completely fluent and combo into each other very nicely, since, you know, when you puff up for fawns that are kind of created are, first of all, more powerful at first, since when you launch them off they have a slight glow to them as they are sharper than regular ones. But you also just create a barrier that pushes back enemies and deals damage to them, so you're constantly encouraged to swap between the two forms, mind you, so that then, you know, you're constantly getting that knockback damage, and then for more powerful forms from the inflated version. But then when you're deflated, you have increased maneuverability, you have the ability to trap your enemies as you run away and leave mines behind you, although him pooping them out is kind of gross because I don't like toilet humour much, and takes away from his cuteness in my personal opinion. But overall, it's just the blend of these two modes and how well they work together is what makes Popform such a satisfying character to play as. But number 58 is my favourite giant, Swarm. What I love about him is maneuverability. You know, you have so much movement speed when you're flying, and then of course you also have projectiles to go alongside that, and you can create and you can attack enemies in front and behind you with his stinger and his blades alike. And then when utilising his blades, he's very well animated. Once again, he has a lot of movement options once you finish off his combo and charge forwards with it. Unfortunately, the main problem with this character is, once again, the tertiary attack, since he is swarmed by bees, which links into his name and creates a lot of personality for the character, though unfortunately the attack itself is lame and could have been much better for a tertiary attack, mind you. Now at 57, we have Hoodsicle. His attacks combo together very, very quick, very nicely. He's very fast-paced. His design suits the figurine format so well and takes full advantage of the Sentinel battle class with his weaponry and his gameplay style. And that gameplay being so fluent and fast-paced, mind you. His personality is just so lifeless, so to say. So you've got to give props to the voice actor for creating a voice that is so lifeless and yet so befitting of a character, because he's of the dark element. He's mysterious, you know. He's not all bright and all about sunshine and rainbows, so to say. So that's definitely intriguing to say the least. But moving on, at 56, we have the superior version of Eruptor, Lava Lance Eruptor. Though unfortunately, the concept itself doesn't make much sense. You know, Eruptor as a knight and a biker at the same time, kind of ridiculous. You know, it doesn't make sense that he would be able to hold a lance with his arm design, and putting a helmet and then allowing his spikes to go through it is a dumb idea in my personal opinion, and the jacket really doesn't add much to disguise the fact that he's still just a glorified orb. But his gameplay is so much fun. It's fast-paced as you charge into battle with Valor. His animations are really fun, and his combos are powerful to justify the melee oriented approach to them. So overall, his gameplay is fast-paced, it's fluent, and that's what makes him so much fun. And sometimes for Skylanders, fun is more important than a design. But the design here is still better than the original one, so credit where credit is due. But moving on to 55, we have Bad Juju, one of the most unique movesets amongst the whole of the Sensei, since she has Juju Jr., which she can launch at enemies, strike down lightning upon them, and then bring him back. And then as he's coming back, you can knock back enemies, which you can then start to swashbuckle down with your swords and everything. You know, for attacks are very fluent and require a great amount of strategy that allows you to further concentrate on the game and further your investment as you're pressing these buttons and creating these strategies, utilizing your brain, in other words. And this character has so much personality as well. The voice actor does a good job, especially allowing this voice to match up with this character, because the accent makes sense. The figurine is actually really well detailed with some nice contrasting colours and some really nice increments on the actual figure. And above all, the dynamic between Bad Juju and Juju Jr. is better than that of Sonic Boom and the babies, because at the end of the day, they talk with one another, they actually interact with one another. Sure, Sonic Boom's babies fight, but they don't really interact with Sonic Boom herself, so that makes this relationship between Bad Juju and Juju Jr. far more intriguing and more fun on the battlefield, as you really care about these two and don't want to see them harmed. But regardless, at 54, we have Camo. Now, Camo in Spyro's Adventure, he was fine. You know, he had powerful fireballs. He had the Firecracker Vines, which were very useful for taking out complete hordes of enemies in front of you and dealing a lot of damage to a lot of them very, very quickly, since most of the time, you know, one branch would attack the same enemy 5 times over with all the watermelons and everything. So that was really cool to see, and it's well animated too. The fact that Camo kind of like swirls around to activate it. And then his watermelon attack, God, the fact that you can shield yourself within it and then unleash it at the best time possible, and the strategy that creates, and the patience, and the risk and reward-esque style to it is constantly investing. And because you can unleash it whenever you want, you know, that doesn't mean that if that at any time it feels tedious. and that you just want to get it over and done with, because you can get it over and done with whenever you please, mind you. But then Thornhorn Camo came out and expanded upon this gameplay and made it so much more fun and overpowered with the utilization of a single WoW power ability that made his pumpkins from the Firecracker Vines and his melons from his melon attack just explode, which created a lot of chaotic animations. It was so much fun to watch this unfold before you and know that you were the one doing it. And it not only elevated his gameplay phenomenally, since you were more effective in combat due to it, but it just made sense for his gameplay to take this direction. Since, you know, you have the watermelons already, you have the Firecracker Vines, so for pumpkins and for melons just exploding on impact, it made sense and really comboed together well with the rest of his moveset at hand, making him fantastic and even better than what he was before. But at 53, we have Torch. 2 words. Soul Gem. By golly, Torch's Soul Gem is incredible. It creates a massive fire blast, which is so much fun to watch and fall before you. But better yet, it deals like 300 damage per hit, so you're creating this huge destructive animation that's absolutely wiping the floor with enemies. Then you have your shoe horse attack that's stunning them. And then you have your hair whip, which is dealing damage to enemies at 360 degrees and knocking them back, so that then you can bring out the flamethrower and just reap utter destruction. This character is so much fun in game, so powerful. The main problem I have with her really is that there could have been a lot added to her design, but even then it's still distinctive and very different from the other Fire Scarlers. Since there's no other design like hers, there's no other Fire Scarler with fire hair, at least not to this capacity, you know, none with face paint, because she's a blacksmith, so all that makes sense, or the same costume-esque design. So her design, whilst not being my personal favourite, is still cool, the complete opposite of a fire pun, mind you, and unique and distinctive to Torch. And the name is also kind of lame, just like Batspin's name, but with Batspin, the lame name is where the flaws kind of end, because her gameplay is so much fun. The fact that you can launch bats at your enemies, and then the more bats you've launched fire for primary attack, means that when you swarm them around you, you can create a radius that's bigger and more powerful, taking full advantage of you spamming the primary attack button, and, you know, utilising strategy as to when the best time to create that whirlwind of bats is. And then, of course, you know, you have the fact that she can turn into a bat, heal herself, spit out bats. Man, it's well animated and brings so much personality to the character. She is powerful, she is fun, and I love that about her. Her design is also great, you know, she's got bats literally spinning around her. That's where her name comes in, and the name is literally the one and only thing about her, which is a name. But moving on to 51, we have Chaos. I love how much variety this character has. He can summon Doomlanders, he can utilise attacks from all 10 battle classes. It makes him feel so distinct and unique amongst the rest of the Sensei cast, and he's also powerful as well. So there was no hindrance on the creativity that they utilised with this guy, you know. We've been waiting so long to play with Chaos as a full-fledged Skarner, and in this instance they absolutely freaking nailed it. All 10 battle classes, summoning Doomlanders. It just creates such variety. It makes him fun. It makes him feel fresh and unique. The animations are fantastic. He's powerful. Just everything you want out of a good Skarner can be found in Chaos. Though, unfortunately, his figurine is very boring, very basic. You know, he's wearing a robe that isn't even all that well textured, and he's just kind of like... He's laughing, which makes sense for his character. It conveys a lot of personality, but it's just so lame in comparison to the other senseis, unfortunately, in terms of the moulding and the design itself. So that's the main downfall with it, really. But at number 50, we have Pinata. Man, this guy is powerful. He's full to brim with personality. I love the fact that this design was finally given a figurine format, because now we have the texturing as you rub your hands along his little ribbons and everything. It's so great on a texturing level. And the gameplay is also really fun, just absolutely pulverizing the heck out of your enemies. And this character might be slow, but there is an ability to make up for that after you chain together enough attacks, which are very fluent and fun to utilize for sure. You can get a sudden burst of speed, which unfortunately, because you can only do it after the third strike, you know, actually creating this burst of speed can take a while and can negatively affect pacing. But again, pacing is really the only problem I have with this character, because the figurine is so awesome, the design is so great to see in a sensei format. And for gameplay, just pulverizing your enemies is so much fun. But at number 49, we have Wind Up. Boy, do I love this guy. His design is so detailed, it truly feels like a toy, which is ironic because Skylanders, well, they are toys, so having a toy that is like a toy is, oh, it takes such advantage of the whole theming of the entire franchise of Skylanders in general. It's cartoony, it's cute, it's everything you want in a Skylander that you want to play as. And then his gameplay is just cherry on top of the cake. He's fast paced because he has such a fast movement speed. His springs launch enemies up in the air so that then you can constantly keep hitting them. And that way, you know, you're being so effective in combat because you're hitting enemies and they're never hitting you. Or you can use your fist that charges up so quickly to knock back enemies, you know, or you can draw them in with your spinning attack and then, you know, constantly spin around them so that then, you know, they don't have the opportunity to hit you because you're outmaneuvering them. Overall, his attacks combo together so well. They're so well paced. And it makes this guy an absolute badass to play as in-game. It's so much fun to reap absolute destruction and know that you're one doing it, as I've mentioned about several times before in this list. And he's just such a damn great design. Oh, he's got such a damn great design, so to say, taking full advantage of the themes of Skylanders and the whole idea behind it. 58 is Spitfire, yet again another very fast-paced character. You have some really awesome combos with this character that are very well animated and look gorgeous, mind you. Unfortunately, the design itself isn't the greatest. You know, I like the way how the figurine itself kind of curls around the base. That's really cool. I like the molding, but the design I'm not a huge fan of. You literally just have flames running down his body as he has, you know, car gear. Which, sure, it's a great way to emphasise the themes of the game, and that's what makes him such a perfect starter pack character. But ultimately, I'm sorry guys, I just can't connect to this design. I don't think it's as great as other starter pack Skylanders, you know, let alone Skylanders in general. But that doesn't stop his gameplay from being fun to watch, fun to utilise yourself, you know, fluent, and effective. But at 47, we have High Volt, with some very satisfying attacks to combo together, which are fluent and well paced. The fact that, you know, you have such maneuverability with this character is also awesome to see. There's such great attention to detail put into his figurine, mind you. And he's just such a well thought out character. His personality is amazing, with a lot of energy and charisma put in by his voice actor. And his weapon is so unique as well, making him very distinctive as a Skylander. So all those reasons alone make High Volt really fun and worthy of the spot on the list. But at number 46, we have Spyrise. I love the fact that Spyrise can jump up and then rain down his lasers upon his enemies. That's very satisfying to avoid enemy fire and then rain down your own fire, so to say. And have almost no risk in the matter. It's all reward, no risk. Which kind of makes this guy feel cheap in a way, but, you know, you as a player have no problems with that whatsoever. And Spyrise also has a unique mechanic where you can see when an enemy is on the brink of death and then finish them off and deal healing to yourself in the process. That's such a unique mechanic and really makes this guy distinctive from the other Skylanders. And, you know, he's a blend of a spider and a mechanical robot. It's such a clever design, so you have a powerful gameplay. Unfortunately, you know, the fact that his top half is so projectile based, you know, he fires off small little disc things, you know, has a cocooning based material, which again suits for design since he is so spider-esque, and then he has a mega laser, you know, they're all projectile based, it's all kind of lame abilities that we've seen beforehand. So whilst the abilities themselves are lame, it doesn't take away how fun they are, and that's ultimately what earns Spyrise the spot on the list, that and he is so distinctive and so unique as a Swap Force character. But at number 45, we have Free Ranger, a fast-paced character whose moves combo together very, very well to absolutely leave your enemies in dust, because you can you know, you can reflect them into off ledges, mind you. You can move in close to finish them off with your sword, with your swipes from your two axes, mind you, which are very unique in concept because, you know, you don't have the handles or anything. You just have a double-bladed axe held in Free Ranger's hands. It conveys a lot of personality, and the voice actor is perfect. It lines up with... If the voice even lines up with the character very, very well. And above all, it's just the fact that, you know, you can swirl around enemies with your tornado attack and then move in for a finishing blow with this guy's very, very powerful, very, very effective melee attacks, which makes this guy so fun and worthy of number 45. We're getting into some really good characters here. I can barely floor any of these, and that includes Bushwhack, who has my favourite soul gem ability of all time. The irony of him, you know, being a live character, that means that naturally he loves trees and nature, and then utilising that giant axe of his, which is such an awesome weapon, might I add, and adds so much to his character and design, and then chop that tree down. Oh boy, the irony is kind of hilarious. And this design, it conveys so much personality, because Bushwhack, he's a little brainless, pun intended, and this personality, design, even this molding, truly emphasizes that. The colorization is really fun. The oranges for whites, they have great contrast and look amazing. And his gameplay is so much fun, swinging an axe, launching acorns at enemies to stun them, and then swinging your axe some more, and then literally using your head brainlessly. Boy, it is fun and worthy of number 44 to say the very least. But at number 43, we have Boomer, easily the most powerful character right out of the box. His dynamite is very powerful, it has no cooldown whatsoever, and his troll bombs create strategy, because you can run away with them and then allow your enemies to walk straight into a line of giant troll bombs, or, you know, you can give yourself a troll bomb, kick it towards an enemy, and then launch your dynamite at it. You know, you can create a ground pound that knocks back enemies from 360 degrees and then go in further with your dynamite. He is so powerful, creates such great strategy, has such a explosive personality since he loves blowing stuff up. He was one of the main poster boys for Spyro's Adventure, and when the game first came out, you could find his character everywhere, because the main flaw of this character is that he's kind of ugly, so because of his design and the hindrance of him being a troll, but the fact that he's a good troll makes him so unique and distinctive amongst all the other Skylanders, since there are no other good trolls. But his element also makes no sense, you know. Explosive expert, tech, okay. But case in point, he had an ugly design, so many people didn't want to pick him up during Spyro's Adventure, despite the fact that he was the absolute poster boy for Spyro's Adventure. He was utilised in all of the trailers so that then they could convey how much personality this guy has, how much he loves blowing stuff up. Fantastic character, this one. I love him, and he was totally deserving of that Eon's Elite to make him even more broken. But at number 42, we have Graveclubber. Which with Graveclubber, first of all, I don't like the fact that he's water, nor a brawler, because that way we have two water brawlers in Skylanders Imaginators. And Graveclubber was never water to begin with. Water doesn't really suit his design, so that's the main downfall of this character, really, because otherwise he has a really fitting voice, not much personality, unfortunately, besides the fact that he likes to brawl with people. But that brawling, that gameplay, is fluid, it combos together so perfectly. Each attack takes advantage of attack preceding it, you know, so, you know, the belly flop, for example, combos into the flying kick from a jumping attack so well. And then, you know, you can jump and kick and then launch yourself forward by holding in the primary attack button and getting the swipe in the process. It's so well thought out, this moveset, how every move can combo into another one, and so it's fast paced and keeping you on the edge of your seat as you play as him, because you're constantly concentrating in what buttons to press at what time. So the fun and fast-paced nature of Graveclubber's moveset was what lands him at 42 alone. But coming in at number 41, we have Ambush. I love this guy's design. His sword and the increments embedded into it is so well detailed and so well textured. For contrast and colours between the browns and the greens is fantastic. His animations are so damn cool. He's so sneaky with the way how he strikes his sword. What I don't like about him is that he's so oriented around patience. You know, you've kind of got to stand still, which is something you don't want to do in Skylanders. So that does kind of frustrate me a little about him. But apart from that, you know, launching into combat on the end of a bamboo as you launch forward, and then creating a bamboo shield, launching outwards, giving yourself a further shield, and then striking your enemies with your sword with flips and kicks during the animations. God, his attacks combo together so well, and his gameplay is just a further extension of his personality, showing how much thought and care went into this character, and I love it. But coming in at number 40, kicking off our top 40, is Splat. I love her design. It looks so cool. You know, it's a fawn, which is something we've never seen from Skylanders leading up to her, and something we've never seen since, makes her distinctive. She has a paintbrush which she utilizes to create for some very fluent attacks. You know, they combo together very well. They're very well animated as well, and truly convey how much power she has, as they're slow yet powerful. She has an amazing personality with a voice actor that truly emphasizes her character and her artistic value. And ultimately, she's just really fun to play as due to how well her attacks flow together, so to say. But coming in at 39, we have the original Gilgrunt. His harpoon gun is so overpowered. I love the fact that his water can, of course, knock back enemies, giving you further opportunity to finish them off with your harpoon gun. This guy has a lot of personality. And the fact, you know, he has a water jetpack of all things, that's just a damn cool concept. Sure, it's not great in terms of combat because it's for waste of a tertiary attack, as I've mentioned about several times already, but that doesn't take away from how cool the concept is, and that alone escalates the original Gilgrunt to 39 on this list. And the fact that you can charge up your attack and create a giant anchor, once again, is just so cool on an animated visual level, and so satisfying to just launch this anchor at enemies and cause massive damage. But coming in at 38, we have Blastermind. A bit of deja vu right there, because what we actually have is deja vu. Coming in at 37. So with deja vu, what I really love about her is, once again, the fact that she's very culturally enriching. Her colour scheme, her gameplay, her name is very honouring of French culture, you know, and her name also links back into her gameplay because, of course, you know, she reverses time to create a modern version of herself and a past version of herself. It's not a double ganger, it's unique in execution. And that brings a whole new meaning to deja vu, because, you know, you think you've seen the modern deja vu, and then you see another same version of her following her as she goes around, and then you're just sat there thinking as an enemy, did I see that girl already? I'm getting a strange sense of deja vu, just like when I brought back Blastermind, who was clearly the worst Skylander, you know, that sense of deja vu that you guys had right there, the fact that that you thought I made a mistake, but, you know, everything was intentional, just like how awesome Deja Vu was in her design concept. And her gameplay is also really powerful as well. You know, you can create black holes, you can combo into them with your orbs, you know, and the fact that, you know, whenever you fire off an orb, your double ganger does it as well, and then your double ganger, you can leave at a point where there's a bunch of enemies surrounding them, and then, you know, as they leave, they have some awesome animations and a great radius of damage. It's just such a strategic and fun moveset, mind you, and such a great expression of French culture. But coming in at 36, we have Chopper. Once again, 2 words. Soul Gem. It's so destructive and so much fun to pull off. Chopper has such a cute design, and a really awesome production story behind him, since he was originally the tech giant, but he was too vertical to fit into the box, so, you know, he was scrapped and then later returned to Entrap Team as a core. He has some really awesome sound effects, because when you walk, you truly hear the metal as it clanks, so that's investing on a sound point. Unfortunately, I don't like the voice acting for this guy. I think no voice at all would have suited this guy more, especially with his tongue sticking out. It shows him as more of a wild Skylander, you know, a bit like Trick Happy, how he would have either, you know, made dinosaur noises or just laughed all the time. But again, his rockets, because they because they target enemies even, makes them very effective and very fun to utilize. His roar is also really fun as it knocks back enemies. And then turning your blades on enemies, taking full advantage of the helicopter design within his gameplay is so much fun. I love this guy. He's full of personality. He's destructive, and that makes him so much fun. But coming in at 35, we have one of the greatest improvements, Sharpshooter Terrafin. Man, I love the fact that you launch sharks out of your little cannon right there, and then they circle round and constantly hit enemies, and it's so fast-paced and fun to do that. Sure, you still have a main problem with his belly flopping attack and the animations with that, but, you know, I just prefer the gun and the whole impact into the earth. This guy feels more like an earth Skylander than Visual Terrafin, because he has that earth armor, and then he also has the fact that, you know, he pounds the earth with his gun and then starts launching turrets from the back of it. Oh, it's such amazing work of animation and design to truly expand upon the original Terrafin's design and gameplay by, you know, making it so that then his primary and tertiary attacks are actually effective. You know, you've not got weak Doom Sharks, you've not got generic punches no more, and that makes him so much more fun. But coming in at 34, we have Tyquan Crow. Of course, this guy was going to get pretty high up on the list. I mean, like, it's Tyquan Crow for crying out loud. He has so much personality. He is probably the most personality-driven Skarner, and I love that. This guy is so much fun to play as, just so that then you can hear him spout his one-liners. And not to mention, he's also incredibly broken. The main downfall for him is his health. It's so damn low, and his hitbox is so large. But even then, you're defeating enemies so fast by maintaining your distance and launching your shurikens through your wall of fire that you're not even worried about getting hit, because your enemy's already dead before they get anywhere near you. Although I did mention about how you create a wall of fire via your roundhouse kick and launching shurikens through them to deal more damage. Now that sounds generic and an awful lot like Blast Zone, and is executed in the exact same way, so that takes away from a lot of uniqueness you might feel playing as Tyquan Crow. His moveset is very derivative, but he has much better shurikens than Stink Bomb. He definitely gave, you know, that character a run for his money, and I really wish he had Sword back from Trap Team, but ultimately they're the only nitpicks I have with this character even. But coming in at 33, we have Bumble Blast. I love this guy for similar reasons that I love Thrillipede. You know, you can launch your bees no matter what position you're in, and they will target enemies. And, you know, there's a further strategy to that, because, you know, you honey eyes your enemies and then launch your bees at them for additional damage, meaning that your abilities are comboing together. And then, you know, you can create a mine to create a whole honey explosion that deals damage to multiple enemies and, you know, knocks them back, so you can have your bees swarming them at the same time. His design is a little generic. He's a tree. We've seen trees and Skarners before, but the fact that, you know, his mouth is kind of like a giant beehive, and then he has a beehive for a gun, you know, it takes full advantage of theming and makes this design feel slightly more distinctive, although his voice isn't very fitting and doesn't convey much personality, unfortunately. But the gameplay and the design more than make up for that, because even with a generic concept, that being a tree, they take full advantage of it to make a distinctive design with the bee theming, as I mentioned about previously. But coming in at 32, we have Firecracker. I was about to say Wildfire then, but this guy is of a fire element, and he's pretty wild. He has so much personality. His voice is perfect, because he has such a wild voice. He has amazing one-liners. Again, the personality alone is the reason why you want to play with this character. But then he has some great gameplay too. You know, you can utilize his fireworks to pull enemies straight in front of you and then deal some very powerful melee blows to their face with his firecrackers and everything, you know. Fireworks are pretty wild, so him having a wild personality all makes sense and creates for a very investing character, and his colours are perfect. For blues, yellows and reds contrast each other so fantastically, making this guy really fun to look at, really fun to watch, and really, really fun to play as, although unfortunately the dragon costume is a bit of a waste of an attack, but that's a minor nitpick in what is otherwise an amazing character, although I would have also liked his attacks to be slightly more powerful. But again, with the strategy of utilising your fireworks to, of course, drag an enemy right in front of you, and then moving in to finish them off with your little fire staff melee animation, attacks with really fun animations is what I'm trying to say here. That is just so amazing to pull off. But coming in at number 30, we have Tri-Tip. Wow, this guy is powerful. He's slow, but powerful. And even when I say slow, I mean his attacks are physically slow, but that doesn't decrease his pace in any way whatsoever, because once you've gone through the animation, you've waited it out, you have such a powerful strike, and, you know, the animations alone convey how powerful these strikes are, as you see rocks flung up, you know, you hear as your mace pounds the ground, manipulating the earth from the sheer strength you're pounding it with. And the fact that, you know, you can create fossils to trap enemies with, and that you need to be targeted with it, because, you know, it takes a while to create these to create these fossils even via animations. And, you know, you might not even get them. You need to make sure that your space and distancing is right, which rewards you for knowing the character, and then you can charge into them from there. Oh boy, I love how powerful this guy is, how well his attacks combo into one another, especially your charge and the fossils, and the gameplay and the upgrade chamber even take full advantage of this as well, as your fossils explode when you charge into them, making this guy's moveset just feel necessary and fluent. and well thought out, mind you. And the fact that he's a Triceratops, you know, bringing back the dinosaur theming, but yet it's a different dinosaur to Dinorang and Chopper alike, you know, making it feel justified and warranted and still giving him that distinctive, unique feeling makes Tritop an amazing Skylander. But moving on to number 30, we have Shortcut. I love this guy's design so much. I love the fact that his weapon is twice his height. It makes all of his stitches make sense, mind you. And the fact that, you know, he launches stitches at enemies, once again adds a further layer to his personality. His gameplay is really, really fun on an animation level because you chop so fast that you can barely even see as he chops, and that deals so much damage so quickly that it's so satisfying to watch the destruction placed upon the villains, especially because when you get to a boss fight, you bring in Shortcut, that health bar goes down so fast, and you can barely believe it because each snip only does like 63 damage, but you're doing so many snips so quickly. It's unbelievable how fast you deal damage with this guy, and the personality is just the personality and design even is just cherry on top of the cake. But moving on to 29, we have Turbocharged Donkey Kong. Once again, this guy's animations and his fluency in combat is so much fun. Each move combos into each other very, very well. His contrast and colours are really awesome to see, and they absolutely nailed Donkey Kong's personality within the games, and I'm so glad that they incorporated Diddy Kong into his moveset, because otherwise, you know, we'd be lost without the best Kong in this game. And there's such great intertextuality on top of that, and not to mention his Super Donkey Kong mode is so broken in the fact that his attacks deal so much damage, and he heals himself up so quickly with such ease. Man, this guy's powerful, he's fun, he takes full advantage of his rich Nintendo history to create just a very well thought out, fun character that's worth getting for Nintendo systems for. In fact, Turbocharged Donkey Kong and Hammer Slam Bowser are so good that they are worth buying an entire Nintendo console and a Nintendo copy of Superchargers or Imaginators alike to be able to play with them. But moving on to 28, we have another fan favourite, Robo, and it's easy to see why. His attacks are unique and distinctive from one another, making him feel fresh constantly as you're playing with him throughout levels. He's pretty fast in his movement speed, so he's never really slow in pace. He has some really destructive abilities, especially his soul gem, and so it's so much fun to rain down this destruction upon your enemies. His contrast and colours are so fun to look at, making his design so well fleshed out and so well thought through. He might be a robot, but he has a cape, he has a really unique looking bow, so they take full advantage of him being a robot by incorporating a put into his name, giving him such great personality despite being a robot, and just making his design feel so distinctive amongst all the other tech Skylanders, especially thanks to his colour palette, because not many tech Skylanders have green in their colour palette, so to say. And his gameplay being so fluent and so fast-paced on top of that is once again cherry on top of the cake. But coming in at 27, we have Spotlight, an absolute beast because you can launch your rings at enemies, then fire a laser into these beams, and then deal 160 damage to enemies in seconds. Seconds, I tell you. Man, she is a beast. She has so much personality, not to mention her design is so cool. The fact that she has rings embedded into her wings and her tail makes her distinctive amongst all the other dragons. And the fact that she has no iris within her eye, you know, well, no pupil even, and once again emphasizes the fact that she is of a light element. It makes sense that, you know, light elemental Skylanders have such light emanating from their eyes. It's amazing, this design work, the personality, the voice work really matching and emphasizing that personality, mind you, and just the gameplay, making her such a beast and worthy of the high price tag, because believe me, no matter how much money you dish out for this character, so long as it's not a ridiculous amount, as soon as you start playing this character, you will find it worth it even, with just how broken she is and how much fun she is because of that. Anyway, number 26 is Magnet Charge, for one reason only. You can pick up enemies with your magnets and launch them off the edge for a one-hit kill. Bing, bang, boom, moving on. For 25, we have Zulu. What I love about this guy is that, you know, you can ride a ball whilst at the same time you've summoned a wolf and you're launching birds at your enemies. You can utilize all three attacks in combination with one another, so you can knock back enemies, launch your birds at them, so that then your birds are constantly looping around and dealing damage to your enemies, you know, and then you have the wolf constantly chomping at them. And better yet, that wolf is just so satisfying to have around because it howls when it leaves you, leaving you truly heartbroken and wanting to summon it again from your staff. So the fact that you're so invested in a wolf of all things, and then it digs up food for you when you're low on health. Now that's a good boy. This guy has a perfect blend of range and melee attacks because, of course, you can keep your distance while launching your birds and wolves at enemies, but then the boar, you can go in up close and personal to knock back the enemies and deal huge damage. Unfortunately, this doesn't add much pacing to his moveset. In fact, his moveset is pretty slow paced because the boar moves at such a ridiculously slow speed. But it's still fun, and that's what matters. Despite the pacing, it's fun. And moving on to 24, we have Stormblade. She is such a quick character. She is so satisfying to speedrun with. Her attacks, because they're so fast, you actually feel rewarded for button mashing so heavily. In fact, the attacks are faster than your own button mashing, so that makes the Skylander so much fun to watch. The fact that she also has the ability to take out enemies from 360 degrees makes her effective. And that's what makes her such a great speedrunner. She's powerful, she's quick, and she has such great personality too. And a unique design, you know. She's a bird with blade feathers, which she launches at enemies. Oh gosh, it's amazing. And, you know, she has the armor on top of that, and a vehicle that really takes advantage of her color palette with the purples and blues, really contrast one another. Man, do I love this character. But moving on to 23, we have yet another air Skylander that I love, Boomjet. I love calling in a military strike, you know, and then sometimes they even give you care packages with food per his soul gem, which is very useful. Not to mention his jet bottom half wasn't nerfed in Imaginators, so it's powerful as ever, and it's so fast for speedrunning in Trap Team where you can initiate the double jump glitch. So what I'm saying here is that this guy has something to invest you in with every single game he's in, and his design is awesome. The goggles truly take advantage of the fact that this guy is so pilot-like, bringing a lot of personality to the character, and his gameplay, once again, all of his attacks are very are full to the brim with variety, and that makes him so fresh to constantly change up your gameplay style and take advantage of his full arsenal. Moving on to 22, we have Chain Reaction, my favourite design ever. Like, seriously, bike chains as a beard. It reminds me of a Transformers franchise, and I have no problems with that whatsoever because I love Transformers. And that's what makes this guy such a great tech Skylander, because he has the tech elements to him. You know, he has the chainsaws, he has that Transformers-based aesthetic. But at the same time, there's so much creativity delivered into this design that makes him just so much fun to watch play out in game, because he's got a unique playstyle to where, you know, he only deals like 2 damage per hit, but then the hits constantly keep coming through to deal a lot of damage to enemies very, very quickly, and then a few of his attacks just deal a lot of damage to a lot of enemies and crowds very, very quickly. Whilst it's not very effective in combat, I can kind of forget that this guy isn't the most fun sensei to play with, and certainly not the most efficient, due to just how great his animations are and how much they take advantage of his design, although he is very slow paced. You know, he walks at, well, the slowest speed of any sensei, so that's quite unfortunate, you know. So playing this guy isn't as satisfying as handling his awesomely designed figurine, but hey, beggars can't be choosers, right? Or should I say, in this case, great designs can't always be the most powerful, you know. Chain Reaction, being the best at design work doesn't need to be best at everything else. Nice and humble like that, you see. Regardless, at 21, we have Airstrike. Boy, is this guy's gameplay fun. First of all, he's so fast-paced. You know, you can launch into combat with ease, since you can launch your bird in the air, circle around enemies, creating the diamonds as you go along, and then creating your combos as you punch, kick, launch air outwards, and then your bird slam downs, making all of the diamonds explode. You cause such damage to such a wide area so quickly, so long as you can utilize this guy effectively. And not to mention, when you're carrying out these animations and these attacks, it never slows down the pace for Skylander ever. And the design of this character, for figurine, God, it is amazing. The gold and the black contrast each other. The beard on Airstrike himself just brings so much personality to the figurine. And that massive birdie helms on his arm, it makes the figurine so glorious and so well textured. It's just so much fun to stroke that bird, mind you. It doesn't even feel like plastic at this point. It's so amazing. And moving on to 20, we have Fist Bump, who can deal a lot of damage to enemies in a large area very, very quickly with a very unique jump-in animation. His fists being kind of like maces attached to the end of them. It's just something really, really cool, really unique weaponry right there. You know, he's not got traditional hands, which makes him distinctive amongst all the rest of the Skylanders. Unfortunately, he does have a rock golem-based design, but I can forgive that with just how powerful his gameplay is. You know, he has some very strong hits. He has attacks that combo together very, very well. If I do have to fault something, it would be the fact that the tertiary attack makes you slide, which is slower, not well animated. And, you know, why would you slide when you can instead just create a line of tripwires in front of you? But the fact that, you know, you can create the tripwires and then as you walk along them, continue to disperse them and then even gain bamboo healing from them. So you're constantly, you know, in the cycle of absolutely destroying your enemies and then healing yourself up. And then, of course, you know, on top of that, having really great combos that are also just as well animated as a jump and attack. Just means that simply maneuvering with this character is very, very powerful because when you leave the tripwires behind you as you walk and then you slam the ground, of course they bring out spikes and rocks and everything. So no matter what you're doing with this guy, you're constantly dealing damage. It's fluent and it's so much fun to watch the destruction unfold before you. But coming in at number 19, we have Hammer Slam Bowser. First of all, he has that same level of intertextuality yet creativity that Donkey Kong has, with the fact that, you know, he maintains what we love about the character and his rich history while still having its own creative spin put on the Skylander to make them feel original and make them feel part of the Skylander's cast, because boy does he fit in. That hammer is so much fun and creates some really fast pace in his gameplay, even if this guy's walking speed is slow and makes it an absolute slog to get from one combat scenario to another, because, you know, you can summon Koopas at will and then use your hammer to launch them straight into enemies. Wow, it's amazingly well paced and once again rewards concentration because you're rewarded for keeping track of where your Koopas are at all times and utilizing your hammer to your advantage to bash them into enemies and everything. But coming in at number 18, we have Wildstorm. First of all, his deep voice is very befitting of the design and really, really works to bring a lot of charisma and energy to the character. And then his design is awesome. His chunks of armor, his horns. Oh, it looks so damn cool alongside that sword. Unfortunately, it looks very similar to Thunderbolt. But, you know, this guy is just such a step up and such a great expansion upon that design that Thunderbolt becomes so much more forgettable in comparison because this is for superior design in every single way possible. And then not to mention his gameplay on top of that is so much fun. Launching clouds at enemies creates atmosphere, as you know, they're shrouded in fog, and then you can charge in with very powerful sword-based attacks, taking full advantage of this guy's knight craftsmanship. Boy, this guy is incredible to play as. He's fast-paced. Unfortunately, he has slow walking speed, but most of the senseis do, so that's not really much of a flaw at this point. And I love his design. But moving on to 17, we have Wolfgang. This guy has it all. He has speed as you can dash towards enemies. You have the speakers, which, you know, you can create two at once. One speaker is to deal damage to enemies, and then the other to have directly in front of you as you fire your arrows, and then the speakers fire arrows too. So you're effectively, well, you can use this to deal damage to enemies at 3 different angles, you know. You can keep yourself defended from behind, and you can create another speaker, and then you can launch your arrows at another 33% of a circle, another third, so to saying. So the fact that these speakers combo so well into your arrows, and then, you know, you can dash straight into enemies to create that great speed running technique, and on top of that you have a really well animated soul gem that unfortunately leaves you very, very open, and that's the main downside to it. Otherwise it's well animated and conveys Wolfgang's personality so well. His voice actor does a great job bringing such charisma and energy to this role, and, you know, the fact that each design or each ability even takes advantage of another ability, and, you know, for interconnectivity there just makes this guy feel very well thought out, and it makes him so efficient in combat, to say the least. Like, seriously, he absolutely annihilates enemies. You almost feel sorry for just how broken he is. You know, you feel sorry for playing as him because he's that broken, so to say. But he's also not my favourite villain design. I don't like the proportions he has, you know, for tiny legs in comparison to the huge buff chest. Not a huge fan, and his figurine isn't all that well detailed, and his dark form is unnecessary. But apart from that, still an amazing character, and he's absolutely broken, making him for an amazing speedrunner, mind you. But coming in at number 16, we have my biggest Skarner surprise of all time, Barbella. Once again, all of her abilities combo together to create for a very fluent, very powerful Skarner, since you can, of course, utilize your claps to create boulders on the ground, which you can then of course, launching enemies with your strikes from the dumbbells, which of course create a widespread radius of effect after the combo is finished. Man, this character's moves are so fluent, mesh together so perfectly, make her so damn powerful, fast-paced, and fun. More importantly of all, she has one of the best sky cheese, has some great maneuverability despite the large hitbox and slow movement speed, and literally the only downfall I have with this Skarner is for design, because, you know, she's a rock golem, which has been explored in Skarner several times before. So if she was more than just a rock golem and, you know, had a little bit more creativity and creative flair to the design, she easily could have reached top 10. But coming in at number 15, we have Tydepool. I love her accent. It brings her personality to life very, very well. I love her design as well, because she has so many marine-based elements incorporated into her armor, into her scale, and it makes unique texturing for the figure, which makes her really fun. Which makes it really fun even to just rub your hands along it, and you know, have an absolute blast with her gameplay. As soon as you've placed her onto the figurine, onto the portal even, as soon as you're done admiring the amazing texturing of the figurine, you get into a combat scenario where you're dealing damage to all enemies all around you so quickly. You're comboing attacks like it's nothing. You know, you're comboing your squids into your whales, and it's so fluent and so much fun indeed, so fast-paced. She's got slightly faster walking speed even over the other senseis, making her more fast-paced, and is ultimately for design, the texturing of the figurine, the personality, and just how fun the gameplay is that makes Tydepool such a great Skarner. But moving on to number 14, we have Flameslinger. Once again, this guy has it all. He has the volley shot to hit enemies from a ledge when they least expect it. He has the range to hit enemies from afar. He has his flaming walk that allows you to speed up and have some very interesting speedrunning techniques up your sleeve to roll with. And the Series 2 rendition takes full advantage of this, as it gives you a second run that's even faster and more maneuverable than the first, because one thing I love about this running on fire thing is that despite the speed and power it presents you with, it's still highly maneuverable and makes you feel like you're constantly in control and constantly invested whilst playing as this character. And not to mention his design, flawless. He might be an elf, which is a pretty generic species to go for, but it maintains the Skarner's genre of it being so fantasy-based. But then, you know, you have the fact that he's blindfolded. A blindfolded Skarner that you never even see the eyes off. Man, that is an interesting concept that I'm so glad they rolled with. But without further ado, moving on to number 13, we have Crypt King. I can see one very happy smile on Chris's face right now. Regardless, when it comes to Crypt King, what I love about him is his personality and how it takes advantage of Egyptian culture with its blend of colours, blacks and golds, since they're really associated with luck in Egypt and the pyramids, of course. And the fact that he's based on a pharaoh-esque design. He has an awesome sword, which is once again just as big as him. For Undead Trapmasters had a theming, and that was massive weapons. And utilising this sword within Crypt King's gameplay makes for some very fluent looking and feeling animation combos even, which can deal with enemies all around you. And better yet, you know, when you create that spinning combo, not only do you deal damage to enemies all around you, but most of the time it creates for a critical hit that rains down swords even further. This guy, with how powerful he is, you know, defeats enemies in single blows. He's just that amazing of a character when it comes to his design and his gameplay alike. But moving on to 12, we have Blades. Yet another perfectly designed Skarner. The blend of his armor and his weaponry combined with the dragon design and the contrast in colors is so cool to witness on a texturing level, on a visual level. He's very well animated in-game since his attacks, you know, his jumping animations and his combos string together very, very well. And his personality is so sharp and life full due to it. And then at number 11, just before we kick off the top 10, we have Roller Brawl, Luke's favourite Skylander and one of my absolute favourites. She surprised me. I wasn't all that impressed by her design at first, but once I bought the character and started playing as her in-game, wow, was I impressed. And even then, you know, back when her design was first announced, I didn't like it much because I was a silly boy and didn't like the female Skylanders very much. But now, you know, I can put past what gender she is to realise that this design is really cool. It's definitely got that rollerballing based aesthetic to it, with of course her rollerblades, her uncanny sense of balance, her little daggers within her fists, you know, her gauntlets, her helmet, how her ponytail flows backwards to create that sense of physics and realism and further invest you into the character's design. And then her gameplay, it's so speed oriented. You know, you can headbutt enemies off the stage, or, you know, you can curse them, you can knock them back, and then, you know, go in and finish them off with melee attacks, or, you know, you can keep your distance with your ranged attack if needs be. But case in point, you know, utilizing that headbutt to curse enemies or to knock them back and finish them off with melee attacks, it's so satisfying. And she has that same satisfying effect behind the moveset as what Magna Charge does, since, you know, Magna Charge can use magnets to pick up enemies and drop them off the ledge, whereas Rollerball can headbutt them into a pit just as Magna Charge can and instant kill them in the process. But next up we have my top 10, which I'm not going to go over the reasons as to why I love these guys so much, because I have a whole nother top 10 on the channel dedicated to me explaining my reasons as to why I love each and every one of these characters and why they are worthy of my number 10 positions. So what I'm going to do here is list them, and you guys can go check out my top 10 favourite Skylanders to see why I love these characters specifically so much. So at 10 we have Zap, at 9 we have Wildfire, at 8 we have Nightlight, at 7 we have Pop Fizz, at 6 we have Double Trouble, at 5 we have Flare Wolf, at 4 we have Flash Ring, at 3 we have Drobot, at 2 we have Smolder Dash, and at 1 we have Igniter, of course. But again, definitely be sure to check out my top 10 favourite Skylanders if you guys want to see my justification for their positionings on this ranking list right here. With all that being said and done, I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll be seeing you guys in the next one. But until the moment arises, peace!